Okay, we're ready to get started here with our reconvened public hearing. I will now call this reconvened public hearing back to order and ask Madam Clerk for the roll call, please.
This is a reconvened special council meeting for the purpose of holding a public hearing to consider zoning and development and sign bylaw amendments for 228 to 246 East Broadway and 180 Kingsway, with Mayor Robertson in the chair. Councillor Affleck. Here. Councillor Ball is unable to attend today. Councillor Carr. Here. Councillor Deal. Here. Councillor Jang. Here. Councillor Louie. Here. Councillor Meggs. Here. Councillor Reimer. Here. Councillor Stevenson has a leave for personal business. Councillor Tang. Yes. You have a quorum, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, and welcome everyone to City Hall. Welcome many of you for coming back for this public hearing. So I'll begin with a few announcements, and then we will have some questions answered by staff. There were a number of questions that were posed at the end of our last meetings, and we'll have a brief presentation, I think, from staff on that. And then we will be into our speakers list. We are on speaker number 104. That is Mark Wilson. So we'll pick up after we've had our staff update. So we are still in committee of the whole since we recessed on March the 1st. And if we do not finish tonight, which is very likely given there are 248 speakers registered, that means 148 to go, 144 to go, which is not going to happen in the next several hours. Wednesday, April the 4th at 6 p.m. is reserved as the next backup night. So that's where we will pick up on the speakers list again. The plan is to go until 10 p.m. tonight. I've done some canvassing of councillors, a number of whom have been on the homeless count over the last 24 hours. So I think we're going to call it a night at 10 p.m. as is normal practice. Not likely to have an extension in tonight's to go late night, but picking up again at 6 p.m. on April the 4th, Wednesday, April the 4th. Earlier today, Council enacted amendments to the City's procedure bylaw. And as mentioned on previous evenings of this public hearing, these amendments will apply to this public hearing. Just want to clarify that. Speakers are given 5 minutes to make their remarks. That has been the practice. Those who are speaking on behalf of 3 or more persons or 3 or more organizations will have up to 8 minutes to speak. And persons or a representative of the organizations must also be present. So any additional comments that you may have that you don't get into your 5 minutes can be submitted in writing to Mayor and Council at vancouver.ca. And all those written comments need to be received no longer than 15 minutes after the end of the speakers list. And they need to be less than 1,500 words. So it can be a PowerPoint presentation. Just 1,500 words is what is set in the procedure bylaw now. So that's the opportunity to have additional input or anything you don't get to in that 5-minute block. So please, just a reminder, keep your comments pertinent to the merits of the zoning and bylaw applications that are being considered by Council, and please also state whether you are in support or opposed to this application. I think almost everyone has been very clear about where they stand so far in this public hearing. If you are using an interpreter this evening, both you and the interpreter will need to approach the speaking podium together, and we ask for the interpreter to interpret every few sentences as well. For those who haven't used the new podium yet, it does go up and down on a switch. You can put it at the level that you like. That's another new feature that has been quite popular. So with that, I will get us started here on our item, the last remaining item for this public hearing, which is the rezoning for 228 to 246 East Broadway, 180 Kingsway. And Madam Clerk, will you now please read the summary of additional correspondence received since our last public hearing?
The following is a summary of additional correspondence received by Council since March 1st. In support, 32 additional letters in support of the application, as well as 15 additional petition signatures in support, and this is unaudited. In opposition, there's been 24 additional letters in opposition to the application, as well as 93 additional names, unaudited, regarding the online petition opposed to this application. And there's also been 10 additional letters which provided other comments. These numbers represent correspondence received by the City Clerk's office up to 5 p.m. today.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So we will start with staff who have information that Council previously requested during the hearing. Ms. McNeil from our Rezoning Center will begin.
We have a short staff presentation to respond back to the questions you gave us at the last public hearing. Just to recap, we have about 30 questions you asked us to report back on. On March 1st, we covered the Mount Pleasant Community Plan process questions, recommendation questions, and a part of the transportation. Tonight we're going to continue on with covering questions related to engineering, housing, and planning, and we have a staff present for the beginning of the evening should you have any additional questions for them tonight. You asked some questions related to the economics of the projects, and the Director of Real Estate Services will get back to you separately. To start the staff presentation, we have Jerry Dobrovoni from Engineering, followed by Jim DeHoot from Housing, and then followed by myself, who will respond back on the urban design and planning questions. Jerry?
Thank you, Your Worship, members of Council. I have to admit it's all I can do to not play with the buttons and try the new podium. Thank you for that. So there were questions regarding the 10th Avenue Bikeway, and 10th Avenue is a very important bikeway and bike corridor throughout the city. And I guess I would start my comments by saying that currently this is an area that has some challenges on the 10th Avenue corridor because of the no left turn sign that currently exists at Kingsway and Broadway. What we see now is shortcutting that takes place along that segment of 10th Avenue. So as you can see, the blue line there shows a fairly consistent shortcutting travel path of vehicles heading north on Kingsway, turning west on 10th Avenue, and then north on Main, so either to continue into the downtown or more likely to make a left on Broadway. And so we have currently a challenge there. As part of the project, the applicants will fund a left turn bay and left turn signal at Kingsway and Broadway, which will reduce the travel demand and path along 10th Avenue for vehicles. So while we know that the RISE development will increase the number of trips generated in the area, the modeling shows that actually the number of vehicles on 10th Avenue will come down because of the vehicle trips will come down because of the addition of the left turn bay at Broadway. Also, the applicant has agreed to upgrading, in addition to that, agreed to upgrading along the section of 10th Avenue adjacent to the site, and we're still working through with them, with engineering staff, what the specifics of that would be. Likely it's a form of separation for that section of the bikeway, and also one way of the street for vehicle traffic. So overall, we think there's an opportunity to deal with an existing challenge on the 10th Avenue bikeway. That's a very important route, and actually develop a facility that will improve the conditions on that section of the bikeway. The other point to just address is in terms of this location, what an important transportation hub it is today. We know there's talk about what the future brings in terms of rapid transit along Broadway, but today there's 5 very important bus routes that form a hub at this location, and as you can see there, service ranges from every 10 minutes at the longest, some of the routes every 6 minutes, every 4 minutes, every 2 minutes on the 99. So today it's a very, very important transit hub, transportation hub, And we've done some modeling just to show from that location, if you jump on a bus that's coming anywhere from every 2 minutes to every 5 minutes, how far can you get in 15 minutes? And so you actually have quite a very large reach today just with that bus service that's at that hub. So from a transportation perspective, this is an ideal location to put people and to put jobs because of the transit connections, the walking and cycling connections into the neighborhood and into the rest of the city. So that was just what I wanted to raise, and I'll pass it on to the next speaker. Thank you.
Quite as tall. So. Your Worship, members of Council, I have 2 questions that I was asked to provide answers to. And the first question related to, and they're both related to the affordability of housing in the area. And one of the indicators in that regard is the vacancy rate. And the vacancy rate is a measure of the health of the rental housing market in general. Generally speaking, a 3% vacancy rate in rental housing is considered healthy in terms of providing choice for renters in the community, as well as providing sufficient competition amongst private owners for provision of rental housing. But as you probably know, the city as a whole has a rental housing shortage. Currently, the vacancy rate throughout the city is 0.7%. So that's well below the healthy level. Within the Mount Pleasant, Renfrew Heights area, the vacancy rate is 0.6%, so it's even a little bit lower. And so that's well below what's considered healthy. And the vacancy rates since 2005 in this area have hovered between 0.3 and 1.2% over that time period, averaging around 0.8%. So it is low, and but that continues to be the case throughout the city for sure. So that was one question. The second question, I have Dan Garrison from our Housing Policy Department to provide a detailed answer, but the second question involved the proposed $1.75 million contribution for the CAC toward affordable housing in Mount Pleasant, and the question was, what could you get with that amount of funding? And again, I'll provide what I consider to be the simple answer, but there's a much more thorough answer that Dan Garrison can provide. But in essence, that amount of money could go towards purchase of a site, a small site in the neighborhood that could in future be used for affordable or rental housing or leveraged with other funding. It could also be used separately as a contribution towards the construction of affordable rental housing, but it couldn't do both. So that's the simple answer. You can't really do both with that amount of money. Just in terms of pure construction costs, that fund by itself could only generate maybe 7 to 12 concrete homes, or as much as 20 to 25 wood frame apartment units. But again, Dan Garrison, who I'll call up, will give a little bit more background in that regard.
Your Worship, members of Council, just to build on the response that Mr. DeHope provided, the question you asked specifically about what could we achieve in terms of housing with $1.75 million, assuming the rents would be affordable to people in the neighborhood with the average income, so in the range of $1,000 per month. It's actually a fairly complicated question. We went away with and worked with folks in real estate services and in our social infrastructure group to model that out and look at some pro formas and see what you could actually deliver with that. In order to do that analysis, we had to make some assumptions. A couple of the key ones would be that we didn't include land costs in there, assuming that our normal model is achieving either city land or partnerships. The other thing is that we assumed that we would actually increase the amount of capital funding available by taking on a mortgage that the rents would support. So rather than $1.75 million, if you were to mortgage that as well, you would get up to you could achieve $3.6 million or so in terms of total capital funding with a mortgage on it. Based on these assumptions, the proposed CAC here could generate about 15 units in concrete construction or about 25 units in wood frame construction due to the lower cost of wood frame. Of course, really the CAC proposal before you is to take that $1.75 million and combine it with other funding sources, either through future rezonings in the area or through other sources like our capital plan funding or sources from other partners. And through that approach, we do think that we could leverage that into substantially more units than the kinds of numbers that Mr. DeHope and I just talked about. So that's just to put a little more meat on the bones of the answer. Thanks.
Now, to conclude on the planning questions, you asked us about the relationship of the STIR units to the tower's height and density. And with respect to any project in the city, the review always starts with an urban design exercise to determine what's the appropriate height and massing for each site. In this regard, additional height is never granted solely on what a public benefit is being offered, only on what is the urban design goals for the area. The tower originally came in at around 340 feet and had 62 STIR units within it. Staff determined that the height was not acceptable based on what the goals for the Mount Pleasant Community Plan were and for this site in particular, and had the tower reduced down to 215 feet. As the tower was reduced in height, the developer considered the economics of the project at each step of the process and determined at that stage that they were willing to propose 15 STIR units, noting that they were also offering secured artist production space at that time on site. At that point, the tower was reduced to 215 feet, as I said, and 15 STIR units, and staff determined that the cost to produce those 15 STIR units on site was such that we thought the community could be better served if a cash equivalent for the value of those 15 STIR units was proposed, which could be allocated towards the Affordable Housing Fund for use with other funds in an affordable housing project in Mount Pleasant. You also asked us about the city's obligation with respect to site consolidation. I think we had a question about why is the site right now contains a number of small parcels. What is the city's obligation with allowing the thing to be consolidated? Well, consolidation of lots is not a city approval. This happens at land titles, and any owner can do this through the land title office. What the city has jurisdiction over is how that redeveloped consolidated lot is redeveloped. In this case, it is the city's obligation to allow the owner to pursue the full development potential under the current zoning, which is C3A, and we'll talk about what that looks like later on in the presentation. In addition, you asked us about shadowing, so I'll just get to the slide. And whether there was a shadowing report, and yes, there was, and we've had the drawing enlarged and formatted and put on the board behind you for review tonight if you want to take a look at it. That information was contained within the rezoning application. It was posted on the city's website, and staff considered that information before they made a determination on whether the shadowing was impactful or not onto the property. With respect to shadowing, it does show some shadowing on the north sidewalk on Broadway, which is the image on the screen above. And the staff conditions contained within the staff report ask for the north massing, which faces Broadway, to be terraced or set back in order to reduce the shadow onto the sidewalk on the north side of Broadway. In addition, it shows shadowing onto the northwest corner of the Kingsgate Mall site. And originally within the Mount Pleasant Community Plan, that corner was identified as a potential public plaza. However, staff have determined that there is a better location for a transit hub or a public plaza further west of this property. And so we would now expect that northwest corner of Kingsgate Mall to develop to its full potential and not require a reduction in the amount of shadow coming from the RISE project individually. Finally, staff have been aware about the optimal solar exposure for that interior public courtyard or private courtyard on the third level. And we've been careful to make sure that all shadowing that happens on that is decreased or minimized in order to increase the livability of the units that face directly onto that courtyard, and to provide relief from the surrounding traffic noise and ensure an environment for a viable urban agricultural environment on that podium, which is intended. You also asked us to show you examples of higher densities without height. We have provided two recent examples of comparable densities with less height in the proximity of Mount Pleasant community, and the first is the southeast False Creek area, in particular the Olympic Village, which has good examples of low to mid-rise building forms. For example, the development east of the plaza, which is in the building containing the new London Drugs, which is just north and east of the Red Salt building, is approximately 4 FSR with 9 stories fronting onto the plaza and 12 stories further east. The second example, is also within Southeast Falls Creek, which is a construction by Wall Center, The Pinnacle, on 2nd in Manitoba, and is approximately 6 FSR with 2 mid-rise to high towers, one at 16 stories, the other at 17 stories. What both these examples show is that when height is restricted, the massing is increased around the perimeter of the site to accommodate the density, either in a continuous street wall or in a varied mid to high-rise form. You asked us about the ceiling heights and the building height and how this changed over time. This is a chart that was shown in our original presentation on February 26th, I think it was. And as presented, the project evolved, and it started at 340 feet and was reduced down to 215 feet. Staff determined that the initial height was not acceptable given the context and in urban design goals, the Mount Pleasant plan, and directed the applicant to reduce the height. For a variety of reasons, the floor-to-floor dimensions also changed over time. Levels 1 and 2 were increased by 2.5 feet to 20 feet each to ensure sufficient overhead volume for the required building systems in order to accommodate and attract a variety of commercial tenancies within these areas. And Council, we now know that the Mount Pleasant Food Co-op has signed an agreement with the Rise developer in order to locate into the largest of those commercial spaces on the 2nd floor. In addition, the floor level of the level 3 podium was increased by 2 feet to accommodate the planting depth that's required for a viable landscape courtyard, which is to include an urban agricultural project. And lastly, the floor-to-floor heights in the tower for the residential units on levels 4 to 18 were increased by 6 inches each, produced an 8.5-foot ceiling height, and which also produces a greater flexibility in considering sustainability features. The resultant floor-to-floor is 9.2 feet, and staff do not feel this is excessive, but in fact is an industry standard. You asked us about the C3A zoning and what the development under the base zoning could look like. Well, C3A district schedule permits developments at 30 feet or 1 FSR without considering the design guidelines, and this is typical in the city of how zoning is put in place. And the goal is to encourage owners to go through the conditional stream where additional height and densities are permitted. Through the conditional stream, the Development Permit Board can increase height to an unspecified amount, providing they first take into account all applicable council policies and guidelines, including council's direction to seek transit-oriented development around key transit hubs like the Rise site and the Mount Pleasant Community Plan. A good example is the Stella project at 2770 Sophia Street in the Mount Pleasant community. The Development Permit Board approved this project in 2005 for 3 FSR and 135 feet. The board made their decision on the basis of the analysis of the area's context, the goals for Kingsway, and the urban design goals for the Mount Pleasant community. It would not be unusual for the board to consider the Stella project as a baseline for other C3A developments in Mount Pleasant. For the Rise site, it would be realistic for a developer to propose something that was around 3 FSR and at 15 stories, 150 feet. You will note that the massing is very similar to the Stella project in that it's got a 3-story podium around the base and a tower of 150 feet. The arguments for this additional height are based on past approvals in the area like the Stella project and the Mount Pleasant Community Plan, which encourages additional height on this site as an expression of the Hilltown concept within the plan, and is supported by Council's goals for transit-oriented development. Lastly, the C3A guidelines require any project to earn the additional density up to 3 FSR by satisfying the urban design objectives for the area and providing a contribution to the public realm. In this case, the proposed 3-meter setback on 10th Avenue would satisfy that requirement of meeting the public realm. You asked us about the elevated courtyard and whether that could be made public, or could this project have an at-grade public plaza or courtyard. With respect to making the elevated courtyard public, it's possible, but it's not desirable. Elevated public areas are difficult to gain access, they are difficult to secure in terms of crime and safety standards, and they're difficult to differentiate between public and private realms. For this reason, we wouldn't suggest that that elevated podium level become public. As for an at-grade level courtyard, again, this is possible but extremely difficult on this project. The site is comparably small. It's about half the size of Woodward's, and the resultant plaza or courtyard would be insufficient in area to serve the programming needs of the community. Also, providing a plaza would limit the amount and type of commercial opportunities that could be delivered along the street edge, as the loading requirements cannot be accommodated below ground like the Woodward's project. So a great degree of the main floor of this project is taken up by loading, parking and loading maneuvering. So what you're really looking at on the main floor is a small, rather shallow depth to the commercial area as it rings the perimeter of the property, with the entire inside given over to loading truck maneuvering, and access to the underground parking. In the case of the Woodward site, the site is large enough and it can accommodate all of its loading underground. Also, with respect to this site, the topography changes about 10 feet from 10th Avenue down to Broadway. So finding a level area to produce a public plaza that's large enough to program for the area and supply the retail around the perimeter would be extremely challenging, and we don't think it's possible. In addition to that, finding the location for this, the logical place would be to separate the tower away from the base of the remainder of the property. And what you'd end up with would be a very small, basically cut through from Kingsway to 10th, going basically from one street to the next without the destinations that you find in Woodward, which is an area that is ripe and full of destination sites around the property, which makes sense for the Woodward's property. And lastly, you asked us about the landmark status. How is this determined within the approval process? How do we look at it, and what does it mean? Well, the Mount Pleasant Community Plan calls for landmark buildings on important and highly visible areas, and in particular this site. It calls council and the community to support the design of an iconic landmark building when granting permission for higher buildings. In Vancouver, landmark buildings are often developments that are higher than their surrounding context, and they mark the site by their height. At the most basic, they provide a sense of wayfinding, and at their most elevated, they sculpt the skyline and contribute to the public realm. Staff feel that proposed massing meets the objectives of a landmark building through how the massing addresses the importance of Broadway and locates the tower at the southern triangular edge in a flatiron form. When the RISE project meets the objectives Whether the RISE project meets the objectives of the landmark building will be judged more fully at the development permit stage with the urban design panel. The panel voted to support this unanimously at the rezoning stage, noting that they will see it again at the point when all the details and the pedestrian scale is determined at the development permit stage. And at that point, staff and the panel will determine whether the project meets the objectives of a landmark site. We've included this drawing just to remind Council of the image that was proposed in the Mount Pleasant Community Plan, which is in the top right-hand corner, of a Hilltown morphology of having a higher development along this property, in particular around the Broadway to 10th Avenue site, and then receding down in height, heading north and heading south. With that ends our presentation, and we're available for comments or speakers if you wish.
Okay. Thank you very much for all the responses to the many questions that have been posed by councillors at the past meeting, and I think we will dive right into our speakers list, and maybe we can go through that same process at a few minutes before 10 if councillors could put questions to staff, and we can come back on the next public hearing session and have the same responses, so we maximize our time with speakers here tonight. So first up is Mark Wilson. First speaker on the list, number 104. Is Mark Wilson here? Mark Wilson. How about Jolan Bailey? Jolan Bailey. 105. 106 is Terry Martin. Terry Martin is here. He's followed by Grace McKenzie, Brenton Walters, Gideon James. Welcome.
Thank you. There's several topics I want to cover. The first thing I want to talk about is, I've seen city councillors recuse themselves from meetings when they had a conflict of interest. And I want to remind you once again that the city charter says the council must remain free of undue influence.
Vision Vancouver received $10,950 in the previous election campaign, and all of the Vision councillors benefited from that money. And I say that's undue influence, and I say you don't have a right to vote in this. You should be recused. Now, I know you're not going to listen to that. You're not going to abide by that because you haven't in the past. So I want to talk about the truth. Several things have been said here that don't seem to be very accurate. One of the things I noticed was that developers representative stated that 40,000 people per year move to Vancouver. We need this development. This is really a critical situation. What they failed to say is that if that's correct, I don't even know if that's correct, but what they failed to say, if that is correct, is that some 35,000 people move out of Vancouver every year. The census figures are very clear. From 2006 to 2011, some 25,000 people was the amount of our population growth. That's 5,000 a year, not 40,000 a year. So when you get part of the truth and you skew the truth to look much different than it really is, I find that really a problem. I have a real problem with that. In fact, 40,000 people, we go from 2011 to 2021, we will be plus 43,000 people. That's 10 years, not 1 year. The other thing I've seen is that the renderings, the pictures of the size and the scale of this, there was a lot of controversy over those drawings, and Mr. Bohaus, who is one of the, I believe, leading people in this area, said that, the mistakes that were made were really fundamental, and I find it very hard to believe that a professional firm would make fundamental mistakes when doing a rendering like this. I don't believe that you were given the right information, and whether it was by mistake, by incompetence, or deliberately done, you didn't get the right information. There's been talk about people presenting here. It's about NIMBYism, and you've heard from people from Point Grey, from Kerrisdale, from Dunbar, from Commercial Drive, from Norquay, from Southeast Vancouver, all over the city. This isn't about NIMBYism. This is about an issue that's fundamental to our city. Now, as far as the scale and size of those renderings and the representation that 40,000 people are what we have to house every year, not being accurate, I say if the developer himself doesn't believe that the honest truth is sufficient to support this project, then you shouldn't think that the honest truth is enough to support this project. The other thing I want to mention is that we heard Councillor Meigs talking about this being the highest building in the area for the next 100 years and giving the impression that that was sort of the plan. And within minutes of that, we heard staff talking about two other sites in the area, Kingsgate Mall being one of them. So what's the truth about that? Is this I know that if I was a developer and I bought up Kingsgate Mall and wanted to do a development, I'd be comparing mine to the rise next door, and I'd be saying, well, I should be at least the same height. So I don't think this is going to be the tallest building in the area for the next 100 years. I don't think that's the truth. Now, when political posturing and partial truths skew the facts, it's disingenuous to the public and it's disingenuous to City Council. So I think you should consider this project on the merits of the truth, not of partial truths and skewed statements. The next thing I want to talk about is who does this serve? When you build a development of this type, it's one of the highest costs of construction there is because of the infrastructure. And when that happens and speculators buy up apartments and rent them out, they're forced to charge higher rents than the rents in the area. Now, there's a provision under the law in British Columbia that a landlord can do a one-time application to raise his rents to match rents in the area, the average rents. So when a building like this goes up in an area like Mount Pleasant, it increases the average rent. Landlords then are able to raise the rents in the area all around, and this doesn't contribute to affordability. It contributes to unaffordability. Affordability is a stated goal of this council, and I don't see this development serving that interest. We saw people who spoke in favor of this, almost all have a strictly financial interest, and even the local business association talked about more customers from the construction workers in this project. That's not a reason to allow this. There's a vegetable store that wants to go in there for profit. That's not a
Mr.
reason
Martin,
to allow this.
you're over your time. So you want to wrap up in a sentence?
Well, I want to ask you who you're going to serve in this. Are you going to serve the public, the some 80% of the people in the public meeting who were opposed, as opposed to the 16% in favor? Are you going to serve the public in the area, or are you going to serve a developer and a couple people who are interested in making some money? I say you're public servants, so it's clear who you should serve.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Grace McKenzie.
No questions?
No questions.
Okay.
Grace McKenzie, followed by Brenton Walters, Gideon James, and 110 Jeff Appleby.
I think it is. This is nice.
You have the floor.
Mayor and Council, my name is Grace McKenzie. My family has owned the same heritage house in Mount Pleasant for over 70 years, and I am a member of the Mount Pleasant Implementation Committee, was a member of the CLG, and attended the community meetings leading up to the community plan. I'm opposed to this rezoning because it does not conform with the Mount Pleasant Community Plan. The height and density are excessive for this site, and there are mistakes in the January the 20th, 2012 report from the Director of Planning, and therefore, Council is not receiving correct information on which to make a decision. There is also a problem with the process leading up to this report. At the Urban Design Panel meeting of October the 20th, 2010, the rezoning planner misspoke. Oh, can you just stop the time for a second, because I have a handout.
I can't actually stop it without
Okay, well,
resetting it, but
you don't
I'll give you the time.
mind taking that into consideration.
Nope.
Okay, so I'll start again here. The January the 20th, at the Urban Design Panel meeting of October the 20th, 2010, the rezoning planner misspoke and gave the panel critical incorrect information, saying that the height and density under the guidelines for this site were 120 feet and 3.3 FSR. Then 1 month later, she simply altered the minutes to the meeting to say the height was 70 feet to reflect what she should have said per her email. The city's senior urban designer, Scott Hines, spoke to the panel after her and did not correct her statements. Therefore, the Urban Design Panel made a decision on incorrect information, thereby destroying the credibility of this process, whereby they approved this project. The misinformation regarding the 3.3 FSR is still in the January the 20th report to Council in Appendix G on page 1 of 5. Therefore, the Planning Department is providing Council incorrect information on which to make a decision. The January the 20th report on page 2 says, this site is specifically contemplated in the Mount Pleasant Community Plan for taller buildings with specific heights to be determined through the rezoning process. This is incorrect. The plan says, page 25, the IGA and Kingsgate Mall sites are to pursue additional density and height beyond that permitted under the current C2A and C3A zoning. This would require a rezoning. But the plan says for the Rise site, support the design of an iconic landmark building when granting permission for higher buildings. It does not say pursue additional density and height beyond that permitted under the current C3A zoning. The current C3A zoning bylaw allows 30 feet, and the guidelines permit an increase to 70 feet. This is what the Rise site should receive. A few more things that the plan actually states are preserve the Heritage Heart and surrounding area at current scale. The Rise site is across the street from the Heritage Heart. Any additional height and density would be contingent on the look and feel of the area, shadowing, and view impacts. This building does not reflect the look and feel of the area, will create huge shadows, and will obstruct views. 3, the Uptown shopping area overall concept is to retain the existing scale and character of Main Street from 7th to 11th Avenue. This project is in the Uptown area. The 215-foot tower does not fit the existing scale of Main Street, nor does it reflect the high-low building rhythms of Main Street. 4, develop Watson Street and explore improvements for pedestrians and cyclists, especially with new development. The city planning and engineering departments have decided that this part of Watson Street won't abide by the plan, per an email, and instead it will have loading bays for 53-foot trucks and an entrance for the commercial and residential parking. This goes completely against the council-approved plan. I request that council reject this rezoning proposal for 180 Kingsway, instead develop this site through the development permit process, increase the height on the site from 30 feet to one 70-foot tower surrounded by 2 to 4-story buildings, and increase the density from 1 to no more than 3 FSR for the entire site. Do not allow big box 90,000 square feet of retail space here. By following my recommendations, you will abide by the plan. I see I have some more time. In Appendix A, page 1, under floor area of the report, under floor area and density A, here it increases the balcony exemptions to 12% from 8% allowed in the zoning for this site. What is the justification for increasing the FSR exemption? Why has this increase not been mentioned and explained in the body of the report? This amount of extra FSR is equivalent to 3 regular 33 by 100-foot lots in the city of Vancouver. And I know you've made some new rules, but I still request to speak after all others have spoken. So I have handouts.
Thanks for coming to speak.
You're welcome.
And our next speaker is Brenton Walters. And he's number 108, 109 Gideon James, 110 Jeff Appleby. Welcome.
Hi, Mayor, Councillors. Thanks. I don't have a big prepared presentation. I live about 3 or 4 blocks away from the proposed development in a house that we rent. We love the neighborhood, but right now there's just no way we could afford to buy a lot of places in this neighborhood. I think that the city needs more housing stock, and the proposal here is going to provide that. The city needs more density, it needs more housing. I don't think there's anyone that would argue with that. And regardless of what the proposed housing is, we increase the housing stock, we're going to provide more for people, and it's going to we're going to increase what's available, and therefore we're going to take or don't know how to say this, but the more that we have, the less that we're going to push the prices up. Essentially, is what I'm saying. I also think that the proposed site isn't pushing out some affordable housing, and I've heard that criticism that some developments in other places that they're taking what's existing affordable housing and getting rid of it and putting in condos, and that's not happening here. We're taking a site that was some commercial and some 2-story stuff, and we're sticking in a large core of apartments and whatnot, condos, etc. That will provide that extra density in the neighborhood. I think some of the concerns that have been raised about whether it fits exactly with the style of the neighborhood and those type of considerations. I think that there are some real criticisms there that maybe the developer should look at. But in general, I think that this area has the infrastructure here already to deal with increased density, and certainly you can see it already with some of the development that has happened in the neighborhood, that we have a very lively and desirable place to be here near Main and Broadway, and I don't think that we need to back away from that because of whether or not it's the exact same height as the other new buildings that are going in, or that the older buildings that are already there. Thank you.
Thank you for coming to speak. And our next speaker is Gideon James.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for giving me this opportunity to present tonight in favor of the Rise Alliance rezoning application for their property at East Broadway and Kingsway. It is ironic to be doing so inside a venerable podium tower in Mount Pleasant. I have lived within a block of this site proposed for rezoning and development for the past 17 years. I also own a small business in the neighborhood, Jean Cafe, at the intersection of Main and Kingsway. I am sympathetic to the notion that Vancouver's population growth will continue to be fast-paced and that increasing density in established neighborhoods is inevitable. Density in Mount Pleasant lags behind neighboring districts to the west, like Fairview and Kitsilano, but Mount Pleasant has a lower median income and a far greater percentage of low-income residents. We are fortunate to have a considerable amount of older, low-rent apartment buildings. New development has accelerated in recent years, and Mount Pleasant is now one of the fastest-growing districts in Vancouver. This activity has had a gentrifying effect, although as yet new residential development has not replaced existing low-rent stock. I have listened to many voices that are opposed to this RISE project. Some of the points being used often to support arguments against the proposal are, in my opinion, misleading, and it can't hurt the debate to challenge a few of these publicly. For example, it is often argued that existing infrastructure and other support for the proposed density is lacking and that therefore the density should be reduced. One very effective speaker at these hearings argued that sustainable buildings do not make sustainable cities and cited Abu Dhabi as an example. I would counter that Abu Dhabi is at least potentially sustainable. Los Angeles, California is not so lucky. Even with the addition of 240 new dwelling units, the density of this area, speaking of the RISE site, will lag behind much existing density in Mount Pleasant if one uses the hectare as a unit of measurement. Since density around transit nodes affects ridership, this area should have the highest density in Mount Pleasant. Many people have argued that the building height should be reduced and dense housing achieved by an alternative form. On several occasions during these hearings, Europe has been identified as a model for density without high-rise, implying that European cities do not mix high-rise into predominantly low and medium-height development. This is not true. Europeans do this with great results. I would say that this kind of profile is ubiquitous and even de rigueur in Europe. 3. Many people have argued that the proposal is contrary to the Mount Pleasant Community Plan. I have read the plan, and the direction for this site is very definite, and this proposal seems consistent with that direction. In addition, a high-rise is clearly depicted in the renderings that accompany the text of the community plan. One of the most important issues raised during the debate over the RISE Tower is the fate of housing affordability in Mount Pleasant and how this project will impact housing costs in the neighborhood. It is inevitable in a neighborhood where the average household income is $37,000 a year that prominent new development will be criticized because it is gentrifying. Any new development will be out of reach of a large proportion of the population. One question I have asked when confronted by criticism that the RISE proposal will produce unaffordable condominiums is why should it be singled out? New market housing has been and is being produced in Mount Pleasant at a fast pace. Is it possible to create new market housing in Vancouver affordable for current residents given a median household income of $37,000 a year? Perhaps the logic in focusing on affordability during debate on rezoning is that the resulting windfall capture could be used to bring the price of the housing down. If so, why would the community want such a benefit to be delivered to a few property owners rather than directed to funding community assets through the CAC system? I think the city's approach, attempting to maximize community amenity contributions, is good policy and is consistent with direction given in the community plan. A final word about the housing market in Mount Pleasant. The peak of the crisis of affordability is still on the horizon. This issue will soon become critical and focused especially around the RISE site. There are several very low rent apartment blocks close to the intersection of Kingsway with Broadway that are nearing the end of their lives. Community leaders should be organizing now to find solutions to this problem, or there will be displacement and further upward pressure on rents in Mount Pleasant. The word character is often used in planning discussions and has become the dominant element of the discourse surrounding this rezoning. I believe that the scale of community living and building age are the overriding determinants of character. If it's true that density and newness are the most significant contributors to character in a neighborhood, it follows that increasing density by building new buildings will change absolutely the character of the neighborhood. It is pointless.
You're at your 5 minutes. Just wrap up.
I was just going to end by saying something about the value of this building as an icon, so I'll just read my final paragraph. So in the context of this development proposal, I wouldn't call the podium tower a spaceship. It seems more like a satellite to me. There's probably no more important concept in the field of sustainable urban design than the idea that densely populated centers should be orbited by relatively self-sustaining neighborhoods that discourage the use of automobiles. Seen in this way, the podium tower, already a Vancouver icon, becomes in this context doubly iconic and an appropriate landmark for a progressive neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming to speak. And our next speaker is Jeff Appleby, number 110. Is Jeff Appleby here? And I'll go on then. Is Christopher Madelung. Christopher Madelung is here. 111, and following Mr. Madelung is Sylvia Holland, Catherine Kerr, Colin Fraser, and 115, Rob Elliott. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Chris, and I'm opposed to the rezoning application. I would like to add my voice to the chorus of those who have expressed their in varying degrees disgust with scale, height, and style of the building. I'd also like to just say that speaker number 100, Mr. Bill McCreary, I think captured a lot of my views probably better than I can, and I urge the council to pay attention to his presentation. I do realize that a few glass towers have already found their way into Mount Pleasant, and however, this doesn't mean that I've resigned myself to accept more. I know that Vision has been pushing a greenest city initiative that is genuinely laudable in principle, and I for one appreciate the prominent place that environmental issues have had in the Vision platform and of course for Councillor Carr. In view of this, I've often been confounded with this and the previous council's continuous support for glass towers, which are notoriously high energy consumers. On the first night of this hearing, I believe one of the proponents themselves referred to the need for building design to incorporate elements with higher thermal massing to increase energy efficiency, which is obviously practical on the lower scale, but impractical on a 19-story tower. One of the things that I think makes Vancouver such a great city, something that is characteristic of most great world cities, I would argue, is the cultural heterogeneity that is expressed by its different neighborhoods, each with its own individual qualities. Mount Pleasant is one of these unique neighborhoods, and it's the one that I and the other residents at this hearing have chosen to live in and help build. It is a neighborhood that I don't want to become defined by glass towers in the way that Yaletown and Coal Harbour are. On a previous night in this hearing, one councillor, in the face of such a desire, expressed his high regard for Yaletown. I think that this exposes the degree to which this council at least absolutely missed the point. I want to be clear, I'm not saying that Yaletown isn't a nice place to live or a beautiful community, and I'm sure the residents of Yaletown would stand up to affirm that position. The point I want to make, and the point I believe is being missed, is that Yaletown is not Mount Pleasant, and Mount Pleasant is not waiting for its chance to become Yaletown. In fact, it is my contention that Mount Pleasant residents want to live in Mount Pleasant precisely because it's not Yaletown, nor Chinatown, nor Gastown, nor Kupana, nor Mississauga, or any other of the unique neighborhoods that make Vancouver so special. The reproduction in Mount Pleasant of development models such as the RISE proposal that may have worked in Yaletown or other neighborhoods reflects a startling lack of understanding and respect for the unique qualities and concerns of Mount Pleasant, many of which have been voiced in the days of this hearing. Further, I believe it flies in the face of the Mount Pleasant Community Plan's stated goal to distinguish new developments in Mount Pleasant from predominant forms of development in other parts of the city in ways that respond to the unique social, economic, and physical qualities of the neighborhood. Another thing that makes this neighborhood special to me is the diverse range of socioeconomic classes that inhabit this area. And Gideon pointed to this in his presentation with numbers on average income. This diversity to me allows gems like Reno's Diner and Rhizome to continue to thrive along places like Habit and Cafeteria. But I think that the continued construction of luxury housing at a 5.55 density will upset the socioeconomic balance and continue to change this neighborhood, in my view, for the worse. I do live in this community, a few blocks away from the Pro site, and I would like to remind Council that it is currently a vibrant community, and has been for some time, that is not in need of a makeover. And I would also remind the Council before the tragic fire that razed the RISE site, there were, I believe, vibrant local businesses on that block, existing under the current zoning, and it was in no way a dead zone. think I'll stop there, actually. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for coming. Next up is Sylvia Holland. Sylvia Holland, are you here? About Catherine Kerr, 113, Catherine Kerr. Is Catherine Kerr here? Colin Fraser, 114, Colin Fraser. He is here. He's followed by 115, Rob Elliott, then Robin Howell-Jones, Leo Valdez, Joel Siona. Welcome.
Thanks. Forgive me if I'm a little nervous. I don't usually do this type of thing. I don't get engaged in this way usually, but I live 2 blocks from here, and I'm a little concerned. I've lived in and around Mount Pleasant since 99 when I moved here. I worked in the West End doing social service, but didn't live in the West End. Nice as it is, I like Mount Pleasant. Now I work at a warehouse in New West, but I don't live in New West, nice as it is, because I like Mount Pleasant. A lot of the reasons that I like it have been said already. I'm not really here to talk about preserving the bohemian character of this neighborhood, though I may appear a bohemian caricature to you lot. I just think it's important to maintain the ability of folks in my modest income bracket to live here. That this development was allowed or encouraged to buy their way out of including what may have been marginally more affordable rental units for a couple $1 million seems, in my mind, to exacerbate the lack of new rental developments, let alone new affordable developments in the city. I like the diversity of this neighborhood, not so much for its independent retailers, for its lack of box stores or what have you, but more for the diversity of the people within it. Not to get too abstract, but I think that the milieu of ideas that grow from the close proximity of people with very different backgrounds, ideas, and practices is more vital to a city's vibrant culture than these artist spaces that are being discussed. Part of the vital diversity of a neighborhood or community or city, I believe, is class-based. I'm deeply concerned as my rent has gone from under 30% to well over 30% of my income in the time that I've lived here. And even with an excellent landlord as I have now, he is under pressure from increased taxes as his property values go up, which this seems in my mind to exacerbate. So, you can see or not see the value of people of my income in your neighborhood, community, or city. But I would argue that we're worthwhile, and that this doesn't help us at all. This proposal as it stands, I'm against. As a landmark, I think we could do a lot better. I think there's an excellent opportunity for a tall building here that is just much better than what I've seen here. I'm not going to get into the height or the density or, frankly, a lot of planning and zoning stuff that I can't quite get my head around. I just think it could be a lot better. It could be a real, something grand and not just a tower, for one, not kind of people per se, but people of a certain income bracket. I could certainly never live there, and I wonder, given my appearance, if I could even get up to this garden or public space, public-private space that's in the middle of it. Just doesn't seem to have anything for me, and it seems to be driving up my rent, along with other things, certainly not single-handedly, but driving up my rent despite a decent landlord, despite me being a decent tenant, and despite me contributing to this community in many ways.
All right. Thanks for coming to speak. Next up is Rob Elliott. Rob Elliott here. Is Robin Howell-Jones here? Number 116, Robin Howell-Jones. Leo Valdez. Is Leo Valdez here? No. Joelle Siona is here. Here you are. And next up is number 120, Helen O'Brien. And then Tom Lapointe, Lee Chappelle, Warren Walker, Mike Weeb. All right, you have the floor.
Thank you. I own Jeweler Bow, a studio shop at 2408 Main Street, Main and East Avenue. My name is Joelle Siona. I have a degree in architecture from McGill University. I'm a project manager for a general contractor. We build modern architect-designed custom homes. I work with architects every day. I love architecture. I love architects. I love the city. And this project saddens and angers me. I'm opposed to this project in its present form. I do not see the architectural merits of the project. Annabelle Vaughn, Sandy Johal, Edward Milden have all expressed so clearly the problematic aspects of the project. Today the city was talking about the parking, all kinds of trouble. And the process, they've done such a good job, I feel I do not need to repeat the objective, and I can speak about what moves me on a deeper level, the subjective, the aesthetic, the phenomenological. If Mount Pleasant is indeed a neighborhood with a majority of artists and creative thinkers, it is a travesty that we have such a huge disconnect between the architectural proposal and the community. Artists and architects have similar roles in society. Both are visionaries. They see the world in a different way. They are concerned with communicating their vision to the public and to creating experiences for their audiences. They exist to show us new ways to see, to think, to understand the world, and to live in it. An artist's work is shared, created, shared, exhibited, and then removed from the public realm. An artwork's ability to impact its viewers and its surroundings is relatively temporary. An architect, on the other hand, enjoys the gift and responsibility of permanence. A building, if fortunate enough to make it through the process of design and construction, can last for hundreds of years. This project is being considered a 100-year project. In my personal opinion, there's nothing remarkable about this project. Nothing that makes me, a lover of architecture, a defender of the unusual, the different, the remarkable, to say, this will change our neighborhood for good. This will be fantastic 100 years from now. I can't wait for this. I want it to block my view of the mountains. This is amazing. This building is sculpture, a work of art. This building is my neighborhood identity. No. The flawed process has created a situation where the architect is presenting a project to us saying, well, we're just at the rezoning phase. We'll make it more suited to the neighborhood later. This does not make sense. Why have the community decide on something that is not yet resolved, and why have the architects work again and again doing something that the community is not in favor of? The process has strangled the potential of our great architects. This must be the reason that Vancouver has so much sameness. And regarding sameness, I will send you an article. I'd like to refer the Council to Francis Boula's interview in the Globe and Mail with Danish architect Bjarke Ingels about the tower proposed for Granville Bridge. The developer said he brought in Mr. Ingels to solve the problem of a difficult site, but also to try to encourage innovation and add new energy to the existing architectural conversation in the city. There's just been a lot of sameness in Vancouver. I think people are just crying out for a new building typology. This is me crying out. With this, we can try to break out of that momentum, he said, and if Vancouver is going to say to the world that we have this innovative city, if we're going to try to introduce new ideas around the world, we have to have a reciprocal relationship. We have to raise our game. We are asking Council to raise their game and improve the process. The Mount Pleasant Community Plan asks for a distinct, iconic landmark building, and what we are looking at here is sameness. Here, design is a collage of attempts to fill requirements. It does not feel genuine or cohesive. And please, a bubblegum wall. I'm going to pass this around to you guys. Take it. You're proposing it. Take it. How about a cigarette butt wall? What does that have to do with Mount Pleasant, a bubblegum wall? And I thought, okay, maybe it's unique. It's in Seattle, LA, all kinds of cities have bubblegum walls. It's not unique, it's not iconic, it's irrelevant and insulting. Vancouver is a city known for its conceptual artists, and you offer us something you don't want to touch, a filthy wall of colored mastication. Is it interactive art? I don't know. But we deserve and we expect more. What we have here is an opportunity. We can't stop the future. We can't stop the influx of people. We can create a dynamic, striking, iconic building that responds to that in a way that's a benefit to the community, both aesthetically and programmatically. We can create a city that celebrates and supports its architects. I put forward 3 questions to Acton Ostry. Are you inspired and satisfied by this project? Are you convinced that it's an iconic landmark, distinct and unique from Mount Pleasant? And would you enter this in a design competition? I'm also a Mount Pleasant business owner. I can advise that increased apartments have not meant increased sales for my business, but it has meant increased rent. The new condos at 8th and Scotia and number 1 Kingsway around the corner from our shop have not increased our clientele. We were also advised by the city that Olympics would bring us a multitude of tourists. Main Street was dead. We had almost no sales during the Olympic period, despite our shop being covered in the New York Times for one of the 20 things to do when you're in Vancouver for the Olympics. Our commercial rent has doubled in the past 5 years. Mount Pleasant has become affordable, and sadly, we're moving out of the neighborhood this year. We're saddened by the thought that the retail space is for big box. Mount Pleasant is not big box. We like buy low food, and we like our independent shops. And just lastly, council has asked questions about affordability. I've had relatively the same income for the past 10 years. My housing has almost doubled in cost, and I live on the 6th floor of the Uno at 11th and Kingsway. This building will become my view. It's not going to block my view, it will be my view. So make it amazing, make me proud of it, make me love it. Make it permeable, make it a giant frame so I can look through it and see the mountains. Make it something, but not what we've all seen before. Thank you. Also, there's going to be a really amazing lecture April 12th by Björk Engels, and you want to go because it's going to be awesome. And if you could hold up on deciding until after you've heard Björk Engels speak, it would be great. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for coming to speak. Next up is Helen O'Brien. No questions. Yeah. Helen O'Brien.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thanks. I'm just a resident in the area since last July, so I'm relatively new, but I've been in Vancouver 40 years. I live in a facility for about 50 people. About a third of those are disabled. They use walkers or wheelchairs or power mobility. I'm concerned, one of the concerns is just crossing the street on Main Street. Disabled people cannot get across. I'm halfway across and the light changes. This is a concern with this building. It's a concern particularly on Watson Street. If you're going to have all those trucks and limited access, it's really a concern. At present, there is not enough time to cross the street. I don't think there is. I've mentioned Watson Street. Increased traffic is a concern. There'll be increased traffic if you put in a building like this. There'll be people who drive to work or commute. That's a concern. The shadow cast by on the east side of the building, there's going to be a shadow there, and that's not good. I'm really concerned about the fact that part of the mountain view will be gone, really, if this building is put up. Affordability is a concern particularly for us, or for people in the locality, because rents will go up with this building. That's the main thing I have to say.
Okay, thank you very much for coming to speak. So Tom Lapointe is next on the speakers list, number 121. Is Tom Lapointe here? How about Lee Chappelle? Lee Chappelle is here, followed by 123, Warren Walker, 124, Mike Weeb, and 125, Randy Helton. Welcome, Mr. Chappelle.
Thank you. Yes, Your Worship, members of council, my name is Lee Chappelle. I have lived and worked in Mount Pleasant for over 40 years. I oppose this application because it does not comply with the Mount Pleasant Community Plan or the principles set out therein. On page 25 of the plan, under large sites, the sections referring to the Kingsgate Mall and the IGA sites say, pursue additional height and density beyond that permitted under the current zoning. However, the section referring to the Rise site does not mention rezoning. It says, support the design of an iconic landmark building when granting permission for higher buildings. The maximum height permitted under the current zoning is 30 feet with a maximum of 70 feet. What is proposed here is a bland, nondescript high-rise tower, not an iconic building. Furthermore, in section 6.1 of the plan, it says, site-specific rezoning applications to change designation of land should be in accordance with community plan principles and policies. This application is not in accordance. The community plan principles are listed in section 3 of the plan. This application ignores or violates all of them. Housing, ensure livability for the existing types and size of families and households by encouraging development that addresses a wide range of affordable housing needs. This development does nothing for families or low-income residents of Mount Pleasant. Economic development, and I'm quoting, this is all straight quotes from the plan. Develop without big box stores. This development includes very large retail spaces. Built form and character. Hilltown identity. Recognize that its slopes are natural form makers on which a low profile for residential and commercial properties helps keep the sense of hill intact. Seek to distinguish new development in Mount Pleasant from other predominant forms of development in other parts of the city in ways that respond to the unique physical qualities of the neighborhood. The local preference is for high-low massing rhythm across Hilltown, with modest height as the norm, mostly low to mid-rise buildings, high-rise only on selected sites. Note, BC assessment defines a high-rise as any building with 5 or more stories. Develop Watson Street as a special site, perceived as unique in history, similar to the Mole Hill precedent in Vancouver's West End. Use and explore improvements for pedestrians and cyclists, especially through redevelopment. It's hard to imagine how a development could be any more out of step than this current proposal is with this section of the plan. Large site development. The community sees some opportunities for high-rise as well as mid-rise development in some locations. Any additional height and density should be contingent on further urban design analysis, including shadowing, view impacts, look and feel of the area, permeability of the site. Distribute the height and bulk in relation to the character of adjacent streets. The character of adjacent streets is 1 to 4-story buildings. Parks, courtyards, and other patios and rooftop terraces with public access is an outcome of redevelopment. No public access. Laneways. There are no laneways connected to this site. Transportation. Maintain priority support for walking, cycling, use of public transit as the preferred mode of travel, and mitigate the impacts of traffic and parking on the livability of Mount Pleasant. Keep pedestrian and cyclist routes relatively car-free. This development is a threat to pedestrians and a threat to a main bike route. Heritage. Recognize and celebrate the triangle block as representing the historic heart of this community. Related on page 24, preserve and enhance the heritage heart, which is the triangle block north of Broadway between Main and Kingsway, and the surrounding area at current scale. Note, this development is directly across the street from the heritage heart. Culture. Develop new gathering, creation, production, presentations, and support spaces with emphasis on flexible use. None of that happened. Community service and development. With new development, keep the neighborhood context and always in mind. Consider the residents themselves as an important asset in the development process. The residents are 80% opposed to a building like this. Public engagement. Build and enhance community capacity through the planning and development process, ensuring that the process seeks common ground and reflects the interest of the broad community. My summary is this. This development does not adhere to the principles of the community plan. According to the large site section, it is not even a candidate for rezoning. And even if it were, it does not conform to the Mount Pleasant Community Plan or with C3A guidelines as required by the plan. I respectfully request that Council make the difficult but correct choice to reject this application. A cookie-cutter high-rise here would be a missed opportunity to create a development which respects the scale and enhances the historic character of the surrounding neighborhood, and which builds on the great potential to create something truly special in this unique location for now and for the future.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for coming to speak, Mr. Chappelle. So 123, Warren Walker is our next speaker. Warren Walker, Is Mike Weeb here? 124, Mike Weeb. 125, Randy Helton. Helton was unable to make it. Okay. 126 withdrawn. 127 is Joseph Musters. Is Joseph Musters here? Coming. And then we're on to 128, Peter Tevan, Tom Lancaster, 130, Jerry McGuire, 131, Danielle Peacock. Mr. Musters.
Hello, how are you?
Excellent, welcome.
Lovely. Hello, council members, Mayor Robertson. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I voted for Mayor Robertson, I don't mind telling you, as well as several of you in this past election, and I hope that I will still be proud to have done so at the end of all of this. I am opposed to the RISE rezoning project. Culturally rich and family-oriented communities like Mount Pleasant are integral parts of what make Vancouver great. Their gradual metamorphosis into sterile, high-density areas causes Vancouver to lose the catalysts that precipitate the presentation of the most positive of human qualities. These are exemplified by beauty, a sense of community, and a capacity for natural joy. You are each elected by the people to do what the people want you to. They elected you because they believed that you would be then representing them by sharing the same values as them. I sincerely hope this has been the outcome of the past election. I think that it has, and I hope that you're here to make the honest, informed decision. Population density can be a good thing, certainly. However, the areas in which it is chosen to be cultivated cannot be contradictory to council-adopted policies and plans, such as the 2010 Mount Pleasant Community Plan. Notice I didn't say should. Why waste time, money, and effort like this making plans like these if the government won't adhere to their guidelines? This waste only further precipitates the further waste of time, money, and effort, ours and yours, in creating the necessity for lengthy public hearings such as this to solve the problem you have created. That problem specifically is the fact that you did not fully inform the public of your intentions until the last second, until they were about to become a reality. Please consider the many other locations worth developing. Burnaby, Delta, Richmond, New Westminster, Surrey. These places welcome developers of high-density buildings, as do the residents. While it may not be as profitable for developers to work in these locations, it is at least allowable and wanted. It must be obvious to you by now that the people, the same people who elected you, do not want this project to continue as planned. At the very least, you will consider a compromise that both sides will be happy with, though truly the views and wishes of the community you are seeking to drastically change matter most. The people who live in Mount Pleasant will continue to fight to keep their community the way they want it to stay. They won't ever stop, ever. Do you want to be part of the council that angers a community sure to continue its battle against big business in their area? Or do you want to be part of a solution involving a change of location or drastic changes to the project, making the larger percentage of the voting population happy? Ensure that you understand this. The views and wishes expressed by the man ultimately responsible for this project are of no greater importance than those of the poorest, most impoverished member of the community. To deem that this is not so is to rob us of our equal rights as Canadian citizens. If the people of Mount Pleasant wanted to live in high-rises, they would move downtown. If people of Vancouver wanted to live in a city with a focus on increase in population density and big business, they would move to Toronto. Toronto is also a very nice place to live, but it's not where we want to live. The biggest problem, as I see it, is that this project has a very real potential to become the gateway to more such developments that would surely ruin the beautiful place that Mount Pleasant is today. This isn't going to be just a landmark building once 10 years have passed, and there are several others that are just about as high as it, and then other ones start becoming that new landmark, and then more crop up, and then we turn into downtown. So, thank you all for your time. Your careful consideration is more than expected. It is greatly appreciated. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you for coming to speak. No questions for you. Peter Tevan is our next speaker, followed by Tom Lancaster.
Thank you. Just getting a PowerPoint.
Okay.
It's the Kingsway on.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I appear here tonight representing Kingsway Honda, and we're in favor of this project. We're the new Honda dealership development at the landmark corner of 12th and Kingsway. You see that building here. We were the first instance in North America of an auto dealership being mixed use with residential, and there are 96 condominium residential units which are both owned and available for rent on 13 stories on Sophia Street there. But I come to speak tonight not only as a representative of a retail business, but also as a lifelong Vancouver citizen. My father was born in Vancouver in 1923. He and I attended the same elementary school in Vancouver. Now, first, as a retail business that has heavily and heartily reinvested in Mount Pleasant, we're obviously predisposed to being in support of further investment and bringing more customers into the area. But my support of the project goes much further than that. I've done an image here of some of the local neighborhoods, and you can see our Kingsway Honda property here. Our same group, Destination Auto Group, also owns the Hyundai dealership at 445 Kingsway. And through our support of our community, we have done some work with Florence Nightingale Elementary, also with the Mount Pleasant Family Center on St. George, and also the Boys and Girls Club. We have learned a lot about the community through that. Gentrification has long been a problem in the city of Vancouver. My elementary school was Cecil Rhodes Elementary. It was closed due to declining enrollment shortly after I graduated from grade 7 and reopened sometime later as Vancouver's first French immersion school, L'École Bilingue, which is just over west of Oak Street and 15th. This is happening now all through the core of Metro Vancouver. The key for schools is housing that young people and young families can afford. In Metro Vancouver, that must mean innovative new styles of living that include densification. I know from our conversations with these local schools that Florence Nightingale and Mount Pleasant are already sharing resources today, and that due to declining enrollment. I submit to you that the only way to increase the use of these facilities is to increase the availability of housing, both in supply, and by having that increase in supply result in with the effect of keeping accommodation rates down. I prepared these slides to show how the plan as it's been expressed to us was to have increased densification along the major transportation corridors. And I highlighted those areas in blue so you can see them. Now, I understand the argument that when you own a property that's in that blue zone, yes, the property value there will go up. But if they offer a new apartment for rent at this new facility, and if that rent, say, is $1,100 a month, you have to understand that if I'm in one of the non-highlighted areas, I can get a brand new place in a new building. The rents in those others are going to go down comparatively. I mean, they may stay the same over time, but over time there will be a differentiation. If I can get a newer facility, the price of the older one is going to be comparatively different. So we've also followed the general zoning guidelines all through Metro Vancouver. We have other properties along transportation nodes, such as Low Heat Highway and Marine Drive in North Vancouver. So we've seen that take effect there. I've seen some news reports that some feel that this project will contribute actually to gentrification. And I submit that the opposite is true. That increased supply, especially in this economy, will lead to a decrease in prices. And single-family home pricing I see as separate from this type of development and would be unaffected. I've also come to report on what the effect of densification has been on the auto industry. We own 2 dealerships here in Vancouver, and I can tell you firsthand what we've seen over the last number of years is a complete change in buyer behavior. I've highlighted several vehicles. These are all the compact and subcompact cars that both Honda and Hyundai sell, and they account for 60 to 80% of the vehicles we sell today. But that isn't the full story. Here's the fuel economy ratings, and you can see where the bulk of the vehicles are that we sell today. But what we've also found is a difference in the way people are using their cars. The people who live in our neighborhood that come to us for vehicle support and maintenance what we're finding is they are not only buying smaller cars, but they're also using their vehicles less often. So what they're doing is they're taking public transit downtown to work, and they're using their cars maybe on the weekend to do a shopping trip or for travel. It's happening to such a degree, we actually have customer service problems today because we have customers who are using their cars so seldom, the batteries are going dead between their uses. So we have seen a real difference in behavior. So in closing, I want to point out this is the intersection of Broadway and Main, and this is the dead center of the intersection of transportation nodes. And I would ask Council, if you're not going to increase density here, where would you do it? Because this can only support public transit.
Okay.
With that, I think my time is done. Thank you.
Your time is done. Thank you. You have questions? Councillor Zhang has a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple quick questions. I've often gone by your dealership and wondered about the residential up on top and the tower that's there. And it was probably, how old is that building?
We moved in December of 2008.
Oh, 2008. Okay, yeah. So it was just before I came to council then.
Okay.
So could you tell me, given that it's, residential, a podium, it's sort of, what were the pros and cons that people raised about your building?
Yeah, I don't think we had much objection, quite frankly, to our building at the time. We worked very directly with staff of the city who set out for us very clear goals. In fact, we had the same architect in this place, and we were actually written up in a recent book called Contemporary Vancouver Architecture as an example of this. I can tell you also, what we were told by city staff was that the traditional open lot dealership of having cars parked outside, set back from the road, was simply not on. And so we came back with a design that pushed the walls out to the street front. It was considerably more expensive to do so, so we put parking below ground. And we've actually had visits from countless other dealerships that are interested in this because they figure it's the blueprint for dealerships in the future.
So how's it worked out for you, having the residential? How's it changed the neighborhood from, the area, since you're a Mount Pleasant boy? And, since you've been there with that residential up on top?
Well, I can tell you that the residents of the building seem to be very, very happy in Mount Pleasant. They seem to be happy with the facility. We exist well as co-tenants, us in the dealership and the residential members of the building. We work cooperatively on things like building security and maintenance. We carry most of the maintenance for landscaping and things like that. So we're very happy to be so. We have responded by increasing our involvement in local business improvement association, as well as we've increased our support of community organizations like the Mount Pleasant Family Center, the Boys and Girls Club, and some of the schools. We had probably the most defining moment was during the torch run. And we invited the local schools, and it was just a fantastic event to be able to celebrate Canada and the city in that way because the torch changed hands right in front of the dealership. And so I can say it's been nothing but wonderful.
Okay, so in your opinion, as you see it, not necessarily from the business car dealership perspective, but as somebody who's lived in the neighborhood, have you seen any negative effects of having more people move into the area?
No, none at all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Zhang. That's your questions. Thanks for coming. And next, we I guess missed Mike Wiebe, who was I think in the balcony when his name was called, but it sounds like he's right here. Number 124, Mike Wiebe. Welcome.
Thank you. Sorry I was late.
You have the floor.
Yeah. So I'm on the board of directors for the Mount Pleasant VIA. I'm also a resident. I live at 6th and Fraser, and I'm a business owner at 8th and Main. I own a restaurant called 8.5 Restaurant Lounge. So this building is important to me in many facets. I am for the development of the building. I think that the density in the area does need to increase. I think some of the small businesses in the area, as myself, would want, and we're seeing a great volume of new business and new customers coming to our place from social districts, Q, and some of the other businesses in the area that actually helped. Right now is a tough time for small restaurants, small businesses. Most of the small restaurants along Main Street are having a tough time staying in business. Most of the restaurants that are there or coming in are minor chains, so Burgoo, places that have 5, 6, 3 restaurants that can afford to be in business at this time. Most of the single restaurants, 3 lines, have gone under in the last little bit, so I think having more people will be beneficial. The fires that hurt the area about a year ago really killed a lot of business, and if you talk to the owners within 2-block radius of that, their foot traffic has gone down about half, losing businesses like Slickety Gyms and stuff that were there that were big draws of people to the area. That's really hurt. So Main and Broadway, which used to be a very prominent corner or section, is now empty. We're seeing more and more businesses come in. We've got 3 new businesses on that block. There's a new development right beside Tim Hortons, which will bring more people to the area. I think that having the SkyTrain station, if that does go through, will be fantastic, because currently parking is one of the number 1 problems that my customers have with the area. Crime is not one. Basically, every customer I talk to, the only issue is that they can't find a parking spot to get to us. The bike lane at 10th Avenue, I think, will be an issue with this building, because currently it's one of the most popular bike lanes. It goes right along 10th, which is going to be going on one side of this building. So if that starts, right, if there's more cars blocking that bike lane and that interferes with that bike lane, I think will be a big thing. Parking will be number 1 again. You can't take a left onto Kingsway, so to get to the building, a lot of people like whipping around the block of Quebec to 8 up to Broadway and going up. So we have way too many cars whipping along 8th Avenue. So we're working with the city on trying to figure out a way we can decrease the amount of cars, because the intersection right in front of my restaurant is a zoo. So we have Go Ballet and everyone's dropping off the kids, and then you've got the alley people whipping up and down because they're trying to cut off Broadway because that intersection's gone so bad. So I think that the SkyTrain and get people out of the cars will be number 1. But this building will have that many more businesses in it, and I think that parking needs to be looked at, and I think turning lanes need to be looked at. Also, I don't like the fact that the spots inside are made for big retail. I think that this area thrives on small businesses, and I think that Canby Street is a perfect area for large businesses and big box to relocate to, and I don't think we need them on Main Street. I like the height of Main Street, and I think that this building is on Kingsway, and I think that the towers on Kingsway can continue to grow all the way down to the Science World SkyTrain station. I mean, the towers are going to completely go up Kingsway. Kingsway was one of the ugly streets, and I think that's done a good job cleaning it up. So I think that having the towers up and down Kingsway is not a problem, and that will allow Main Street to stay what it is today at its height. In 1912, so 100 years ago, all the towers on Main Street were built. So the Lee Center, Belvedere Courts, Quebec Manor, pretty much every tower was built in 1912. So this year is the 100-year anniversary, and I think we should keep those as the landmarks along Main Street, and this tower is on Kingsway, and I don't think that should be an issue. One of the other so basically the bike lanes, a big point for me. The parking and the big box are kind of the 3 negatives, so I think the density is a positive. And as a board member, I do want to see that money that's been allocated to the city, if the project goes through, the $6.2 million or $6.25, I would like to see that in Mount Pleasant. I know there's lots of different functions for it. I know the pool's been a big talk in the area, and there's tons of others. And I used to lifeguard for 9 years for Vancouver City, and I know how that used to be pretty much a daycare for students in the area. It was packed every single day. We had a lineup before we opened, and I think that the new pool at Hillcrest does not account for all the kids in the neighborhood that were using it. Mount Pleasant is a family center. If you look at Dunbar and other areas, they're losing the amount of kids in the area, but Mount Pleasant continues to grow. It's a great place for new homeowners And I think that you need to have the facilities for the children. And that's where the community center, that gym, first day it opened, has been full. I mean, you can see that people do use the resources in the area. I think that they need to be kept in it.
All right.
That's it.
That's your time. Thanks for coming to speak. Okay. Councillor Jennings, you do a question again?
Just a quick question. We've heard from some business owners over the last couple sessions, and one of the issues, so first question I have for you is, how's business these days?
Good. We're up 25% in 2011 over 2010, so business is going well.
Okay.
But it is a struggle, and there's a lot of costs that continue to go up. One's with all the city costs that continue to each department. So we've just added compost, which is extra cost. We're doing all these costs because people do want greener businesses and small businesses, and it is a fight for every dollar. So you are seeing every business fight, but there are some small businesses that do talk to me on the BIA that are down significantly. So in their 7 years business, this is their worst year.
So this goes to why, so you're saying density is important because there's more bodies into your business, essentially?
Yeah. In the last 4 months, I've seen those 2 new buildings. I've seen brand new customers, repeat customers coming in from them, and that's, it's great to see because those are walking customers that, right, they're 3 blocks away, they come in. Those are the customers we need because we don't want our customers driving because there is no place to park, right? We want them to have a couple drinks. It's easy for them to walk home, right? It's a community-based kind of area, and so the more people walking around, the better.
So my final question, the reason I'm leading up to this is some of the arguments that we've heard is that if you have more people, the value of property goes up, your taxes will go up, and you'll have to raise your prices to pay your taxes, and people can't afford to eat at your place anymore and only cater to a certain clientele. Is that necessarily true from a business person's perspective?
Yes.
It is?
In a sense that our property tax just doubled, right? Because our place was sold and it was worth $150. So it was sold for, I guess, 4 times what it was valued at, the building. So our property tax doubled. So it is all those costs. I'm saying all my garbage, every cost has gone up, right? Okay. So each different person's asking for a little bit more. So it is making it harder and harder. But I do feel that people are finding value in food that is locally done. And there are some places we're starting to see benefits. We are getting stuff cheaper. And, right, if stuff is local, there's less transportation costs, and people will go for that. So I think that there is a spot for restaurants, businesses, retail to thrive in Mount Pleasant. The property costs will go up, and I think everyone's got to realize that. But if the density is there, then we will still be able. And I think that if that building's not there, then more businesses will go out than less.
Okay. Thank you. Very helpful.
Councillor Reimer, question?
Thanks for coming tonight. You said that you were on the board of the Mount Pleasant BIA. Are you here representing them, or are you telling us that for? Do you know?
No, I am. I can represent them. Okay. So we do have separate voices on the board. So you did have my president did speak here, I think 3 weeks ago. So John Boychuk from Banana Town. Mm-hmm. So I think he came more as the voice, and then I'm just speaking on behalf of myself and as a member of the board. So that I do see a lot of businesses, and we do talk to a lot of businesses in the area, so I've got more of an understanding then.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I didn't want to invalidate your I just wanted to clarify for my own thinking about what position who you were representing.
So the board did write a letter saying it did approve the building.
Okay.
So we just had a few issues, and I know that Lynn, who's our director, right, the money, the $6.2 million is a big thing for her because she sees a lot of projects and a lot of people say that we're going to get money for certain things, and then they disappear. So that's one of the issues. And I know that funding is tough, and we do want to make sure that it's being spent in the right way and not just on a wasteful thing. But this area is growing very fast, and I think that if we don't do it right in 5 years, this area is going to look wrong. And it could look amazing. It could grow to what it is. So.
Okay, thanks. That's your questions. Thanks for coming. Next up is 129 Tom Lancaster. Is Tom Lancaster here? Is Jerry Maguire here? 130 Jerry Maguire. Haven't seen him. Danielle Peacock is here. 131. And she's followed by 132 Earl Peach, 133 Mark Lawrence, 134 Michael Seniuk, and 135 Flora Purcell. Welcome.
Mayor Robertson and members of council, I appreciate this opportunity to address you. I have been living in Mount Pleasant for almost 32 years and live in the Quebec Manor Housing Co-op. I participated in a number of the workshops and open houses during the development of the plan, and am currently on the implementation committee. I consider this one of the most significant and sensitive sites in Mount Pleasant, more so than either the Kingsgate Mall or the IGA site. With respect, I wish to express my opposition to the RISE application. The plan refers to Mount Pleasant's distinctive hilltown identity and the historical importance of this. Whenever I walk, ride, or drive along Kingsway, from the top of 12th to Broadway, I am struck by the great panorama view of the city, and I feel a deep sense of where I am. I think this is partly because Kingsway approaches the downtown at an angle, and the RISE proposal, with its imposing height and bulk, will drastically block this expansive view which is available to everyone. I was surprised when I attended the April 2010 open house and saw this site, considered a landmark site, identified for the possibility of greater height, because at the workshops I attended, what was discussed was putting higher buildings up around 12. The RISE proposal, being on the west side of Kingsway and midway along the slope, will really diminish the whole hilltown feel of this prominent section of the neighborhood. And so I see the west side of Kingsway as being very different from the east side. And I believe the idea in the plan of developing Watson Street as a special site and the bike walkway will be severely limited by the proposal as well. I was a founding member of Grunt Gallery, which has existed here since 1984. The plan mentions Mount Pleasant's reputation as a hub of creative activities and cultural and artistic expression, and speaks of it as a valuable economic asset to the whole of Vancouver. This has happened because artists and their support base have been able to live, work, and create public venues here. But this is changing, and many have been or are being forced out. The plan also refers to the diversity of population and asks that we ensure housing that addresses a wide range of affordable housing needs. Diversity, including people from a broad range of backgrounds and income brackets, is a much-loved aspect of Mount Pleasant's identity and key to its retaining its valued character and soul. Without affordable housing and studio space, this will vanish. I support increasing density and believe Mount Pleasant is doing its share towards this end, and actually began almost 20 years ago with the live-work developments. I believe the RISE proposal, with its emphasis on high-rise view condos, will negatively impact affordability. The Mount Pleasant Historical Context Statement makes reference to the origin of the area as a pre-automobile age village within walking distance of major public transit, and I've heard Mount Pleasant referred to as Vancouver's original urban village. Its urban village feel is a fundamental and desirable characteristic and a major reason why it is such a popular section of town. The plan asks that we complement the preserved heritage with architectural innovation that creates a future heritage. I believe there is nothing in the RISE that differentiates it from other standard Vancouver designs or makes it a landmark building. I think in its current monolithic form, it will very much diminish the whole look and feel of this historic area and the cherished heritage heart. I read the following quote presented by Scott Hine on behalf of the city and RISE. We are beginning together with the neighborhood to define the new Mount Pleasant urbanism more clearly and to define it to its limits, all in a good way. I disagree. What I think the plan is asking for is an urbanism that retains the original urban village feel and enhances it in locations as significant as this one with new legacies, and I don't believe the RISE proposal does this. I also disagree with the perception that the city and RISE working together with the neighborhood. There has been much comment about the way the current planning process does not work. While I was going to meetings and filling in yellow sticky notes to create a plan for the future of my neighborhood, RISE was also working on its proposal. It seems that long before the Mount Pleasant Community Plan was finalized, the wheels had very much been set in motion for this proposal. At a meeting of the Implementation Committee, I sat in a group with Chris from RISE, and he mentioned that in Edmonton, developers speak with groups representing the community first before they put together a proposal. I thought, what a refreshing concept. the developers and residents working together. What the current process does is set up a situation rooted in reaction and backlash. It's probably safe to say that the vast majority of residents speaking out about this proposal are against it. I believe that if it goes ahead as it stands, it will be seen as something forced on the neighborhood, and the city will be seen as having accommodated the developers at the expense of the community. I hope that you will honor the spirit of the plan and reject this RISE application as it stands right now. Thank you.
Thanks for coming to speak. And next up is Earl Peach, followed by Mark Lawrence.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. In spite of the fact that I disagree with Gideon, I still declare that they have the best cappuccinos in the city. So some anecdotes. Today, as I rode down Main, past the new building at 18th, a man passing me said, "Yikes! It's turning into Yale Town around here," referring to the new building, which is all metal and glass. Story 2, Easton's East, which wants to move, is in a fight with the planning department about not matching its exterior with the McDonald's on one side and the liquor store on the other. Story 3, today one of the owners of Rhizome, which is across the street from the proposed development, pretty much, told me that their rent has doubled since they opened, and quote, "If it goes up any more, we won't be able to stay here." And I'm sure they're not alone. There was at least one other business owner tonight that expressed the same thing. Right, so along with the various other costs and businesses are facing in the area, it's doubling of rents and more, and that's going to go on. Here's the beginning of the context of people's opposition to the proposed RISE development. Main Street now has a mix of small businesses, many of whom are looking at higher rents as the area gentrifies. The RISE development, like the Sequel 138 development on the site of the Pantages Theatre, like the Woodwards development and like so many others, will be a bomb which blows apart the character of a neighborhood, so a few developers can make a lot of money. Perhaps the poster child for this kind of destruction is the area around Broadway and Cambie. Now, in my opinion, a soulless vacuum of big box stores and small box condos. Clearly, this is the vision your planning department has for Main and Broadway. And the residents of this area are not going to allow it. We like the affordability of Mount Pleasant, the mix of different incomes and cultures, all features absent from Cole Harbour, Yaletown, Broadway and Cambie, dare I add the Bosa development. In fact, anywhere Vancouver's charming planning department gets its dibs in. I guess really this talk is about a disconnect between the Vancouver's planning department and City Council as I see it. As the rent petition states, there are many other ways of achieving the desired density you're looking for in order to support transit on the Broadway route, which is a desirable goal. And this council should, in no uncertain terms, direct its planners to rethink their approach. I understand that the previous head of the planning department has recently departed, and who knows what the culture really is inside that city office. In spite of lip service to the area plan, the previous head of planning admitted in a meeting with RAMP that planning had no confidence in the STIR process, which explains why they so casually deep-sixed the social housing component of this development. Of course, this likelihood was held like a threat over the community's head during the flawed public hearings, and planning made good on that threat almost as though it were some kind of punishment for having the nerve to demand something less than 26 stories of misery. Just today, it comes out that planning is attempting to do an end run around the 20% welfare rate housing requirement for new developments in the downtown east side, specifically with regard to the Pantages project. Clearly something is broken in the culture of this department, and I can only imagine that planners meet and roll their eyes at the constraints put on them by council, not to mention the humble aspirations of neighborhood people to keep some semblance of community. This council has been elected on people's platform of affordable housing, sensible development and transit, and yet decisions continue to be forthcoming which make the city more expensive to live in, communities less livable, and this is not your fault, saddled with expensive transit which bankrupts the rest of the system. I challenge this council to stand up to the sleek, development-oriented culture within its own planning department and to represent the people that elected it. Thank you.
Thanks for coming to speak, Mr. Peach. Mark Lawrence is our next speaker, number 133, followed by Michael Seniak, Flora Purcell, Tracy Michaud, and Tavis McCallum. Yeah, you can raise that podium up if you like. There's a button down to your right there. Okay.
All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mark Lawrence. I've recently been asked to be a writer for the upcoming Portland Housing Society newspaper on current issues. So I'm not going to talk about the height or width or length of the building. I'm more or less going to talk about the attitude that comes with building such dwellings as condominiums. And we all want a healthy attitude, I should think. So this is why I be opposed to such a building. I've worked enough high-rise condos to see a growing trend. I bring to mind one. It sits on the corner of Kingsway and Knight. It's a condominium sitting on top of a large, priceless food store. Okay, I get it. Keep the rich self-contained while forcing retail needs on them under the guise of convenience. They're building a monolith of a condominium on the corner of Nanaimo and Kingsway. You've got a heritage school on the corner of Joyce and Kingsway, hanging on by a wing and a prayer. What prime real estate that would be. Imagine the view. But let's back up this trolley of progress that's racing up Kingsway Corridor. How could the residents of Mount Pleasant not see this project coming? At a City Hall meeting, I was not surprised. I'm not surprised at these entrepreneurs being all for the project as they work their sales pitch, even though further investigation by them, I'm not for anybody trying to make a buck. There's nothing wrong with that. But on further investigation, would have told them that the Woodwards project in the downtown east side became that community's nightmare. This one condo project brought in so many entrepreneurs with their fancy boutiques and cafes and pricey restaurants, plus all RSOs in the immediate surrounding area either shut down or kicked everyone out in order to raise the rent for student housing and young people just entering the job market and can afford it. This became gentrification plot on a massive scale. There are many such young working people in the immediate Mount Pleasant area whose salary will no longer be compatible once a landlord raises the rent to balance out the condo prestige which has now entered into community. We launched a survey of these upscale businesses and found discrimination by owners and patrons against people living in the downtown community for years. Let's consider a reference. In Mount Pleasant, there's a restaurant there called Reno's on Broadway, not far from Maine. 2 bacons and sausage, eggs, pan fries, $3.95. French toast special. Bacon and sausages plus 2 eggs, $5.95. Mushroom burger special, $3.95. Fantastic. This is neighborhood friendly. But will those prices stay the same after you've changed the lay of the land? What guarantee do we have that they will even remain there, not bought out by one of these entrepreneurs with deep pockets? You cannot get around the fact that condos attract restaurants with jacked up price mentality. Most recently, okay, well, I think one of the speakers that just spoke proved that his prices will definitely go up. Nevertheless, the point being made is you're locking out a lot of local income people from affording a meal that is supposedly so much better for the price. To add insult to injury is done in their own neighborhood. How could this be something that the people of Mount Pleasant would want to embrace? You're no longer just housing the rich, you're breeding, for lack of a better choice of words, a hateful and hurtful mentality when trying to bring 2 different socially economic groups of people. Councillor Jang, all of this is systematic gentrification. There is no other meaning which you rehash with another speaker. Just like the blueprints of the building, there are no 2 different drawings for the same plan. only one. I personally owned a condo of my own in the East End. I put down $240,000 cash money, which was the complete bill of sale. Those people that surrounded me started a vindictive vigilante campaign against me, even to the point of committing crimes against me, which went unchecked by the police when I responded to them. All because I didn't fit the norm. I wasn't part of the working class at the time, so I must have been up to no good, which is not the case at all. To get right down to brass tack, condos are run by a strata corp that dictate what you can and cannot do with what you own. I could not even rent my own spare bedroom out to someone on social assistance. How unsociable is that? Yet I'm supposed to be a homeowner. Then the strata committee is formed by a group of owners in the building. In turn, those owners have the right to vote on what takes place inside the building and on the outside. So, more than likely, unnecessary security will be added into the neighborhood, which is not needed because we've established that it's a low
Mr. Lawrence, you're at your time. You could wrap up in a sentence.
Wrap up in a sentence. Okay. I fail to see you're making good on a campaign promise. I mean, if the downtown East Side is the poorest community in the country, here's a great opportunity to go down in history by taking all these slated condos and using them for social housing. And housing for... Let me see. Seeing that many such people live in and around the area in an attempt to distance themselves from the drug and crime from the downtown East Side. Plus, buildings could still be made attractively compatible to the surrounding community.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Lawrence.
If our mayor ended homelessness,
that's your time.
Well, I think that would be cause to make him a great humanitarian as well as council.
All right. Thanks for coming. Next up is Michael Senyak. I've got that right, followed by Flora Purcell and Tracy Michaud. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, and residents of Mount Pleasant. My name is Michael Senyuk, and I have lived in Mount Pleasant for 17 and a half years. I work here, plus I shop here, I party here. I love the fact that Mount Pleasant is pedestrian-friendly and bicycle-friendly, some of the many beneficial reasons I call Mount Pleasant home. The job I did in Mount Pleasant required me to walk on Kingsway and Broadway right across Watson. I worked as a street cleaner for over 3 years. At that time, the traffic was manageable, but still there was noise and air pollution. Hey, it's not a perfect world. Okay. I am deeply concerned for myself and others about the negative results of more congestion. The air pollution from vehicles entering and departing at the proposed high-rise with 241 parking spaces is way too much. At 19 stories, there will be a major increase in harmful emissions from the vehicles people in the high-rise own and use. The traffic assessment available on the city rezoning website states 161 vehicles per hour during peak hours for 268 units. That's obviously not 241. My lungs will not benefit from this, a very heavy carbon footprint. I hope Council does not bypass the wonderful ideas and suggestions in the Mount Pleasant Community Plan about traffic calming measures, space for pedestrians, and a lower carbon footprint. 161 vehicles per hour on Watson is definitely not a low carbon footprint. All options have something wrong in them, and at best, we the citizens of Mount Pleasant seek out the least damaging. There is more of a need for livability than density. 19 stories is more about greed than need. No rental units and no community yard space, no public green space. The constant changes in Mount Pleasant and elsewhere in Vancouver seem endless. I know change must come, but we have to manage that with caution and proper insight to the needs of the community and the environment. At the Collection 45 Presentation Center nearby on Broadway, public interest is positive to 7 stories. This is directly behind where I live. A welcome addition to the hood. Respectful. I firmly believe that 19 stories is overdevelopment. 19 stories will cast long and nasty shadows that will block the sun I desperately need. 19 stories will compromise the private and public view of the sky and the North Shore Mountains. There are many character buildings in Mount Pleasant that have a unique and distinct flavor. These buildings are reminders that the community has a vibrant history that is still appreciated. Iconic? The Lee Building comes to mind. The Belvedere at Main and 10th, the Quebec Manor on 7th Avenue, the Frontenac at 11th Avenue in Quebec, the Algonquin at 10th Avenue in Ontario, the Ivanhoe at 7th Avenue in Carolina, and the Ashnola at 6th Avenue in Maine are all the right height. I call them iconic. The new buildings that are in Mount Pleasant have all respected the C3A height restrictions. They are a welcome sight, respectful. The Sophia on 11th Avenue, nice. The Social on Scotia Street, cool. Elements on Ontario Street, looks good. The Mount Pleasant Community Center with residences on 7th Avenue, not bad. The Stella at 12th and Kingsway, nice view. The Uno at 11th and Kingsway, very modern. The District on East 8th, welcome to the hood. All of these dwellings are very welcome additions to Mount Pleasant, and so are the people that live in them. All these buildings have deeply respected the character, the style, the class, and soul of my fantastic neighborhood. 19 stories would be extremely out of character in Mount Pleasant. It just does not belong here, period. I'm here to ask the mayor and council for support to keep the present zoning height as is at C3A. To me, that means 10 stories, no more than 12. I respectfully request that Rise compromise and build a 10, no more than 12-story condo that would complement the neighborhood just like the other new buildings. A building that would respect all the other new mid-rise condos would be a welcome addition to the hood. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. And Flora Purcell is next, followed by Tracy Michaud, Tavis McCallum, Attila Fodor. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council and friends and neighbors. I speak first representing the Quebec Manor Housing Co-op. I'm the Vice President of the Board of Directors there, and I'm speaking in opposition to this project as it's presented today. I want to point out that the United Nations declared 2012 as the International Year of Cooperatives, and I say that because so many of my friends and neighbors have entered into this process with a very cooperative spirit with the city in working on the plan, the community meetings, and I feel like the sense of that cooperation has been broken. I myself, I went to several open houses and community fairs and workshops, but nothing compared to some of my neighbors and many of my friends. So I feel for them their lack of trust at this point to see what has been presented to us. Quebec Manor is 2 blocks from the Rise site. And while I was whiling away my time here, listening to how long people have lived in Mount Pleasant, I believe our members and their families have resided in the neighborhood for over 1,400 years. So, and it's not that we're all that antique, but we are a very stable community. And why is that important? Because we feel we belong there. We support our community businesses. We walk, we work, and we live, and I say, yeah, party in the neighborhood. And it's a great neighborhood. It's diverse, and it has a lot of the heritage that now, as Vancouver is being propelled quickly into the modern age, we are starting to respect as what's left of them. And Quebec Manor is celebrating our centenary this year, as is the Lee Building, and as I believe is the Jansen Building, which will, I guess, be torn down without a bat of an eyelash in this project. So I want to pay respect to that on the Rise site. So why are all these people, I mean, we're a co-op that's built on people doing their part and volunteering, and why are all these people spending endless hours at these meetings and planning and implementation projects? What is their motive? And what is the motive of the developer? I mean, they develop, I guess, and hopefully they make some money. But these people are in there with their hearts and souls to build a better community for themselves, their families, and their neighbors. For myself, I walk by this site every day on my way to work, up and down Kingsway. And as somebody mentioned, when you're coming down Kingsway, that you see the city, and sometimes what I see, I'm like, what is that BC Place roof doing? Is it over or not, or what? Or the Shangri-La, and I say, who let that happen? And I just think that in this community, we don't want certain things to happen. And I appreciate the previous speaker who outlined lots of great densification that has gone on in this neighborhood, and he listed them all, so I don't have to. But I appreciate almost all of them, and they add a lot to the neighborhood. And I think this site could add a lot too. One thing I notice at the co-op and when I'm gardening is that people come by the building all the time and say, I just love this building. And can we live here? And are there any? And I just love it. And I go by here. And the speaker earlier this evening said, give us something we can love. It's not like we won't take anything. Really, it's a growing city, and bring it on. But really, bring it respectfully, because we're working hard to make it work for everybody. And I just want to say a little nod to Watson Street, dear Watson Street, where my grandmother had her house many years ago, and it disappears and appears, and she was farther south. But it is a special place, and I like what's been done between 12th and 11th and 10th, where there's more of a living streetscape. And I don't believe that will persevere in this plan towards Broadway. And it is adjacent to the heart of the neighborhood, which has been identified. And if the process hasn't broken the hearts of Mount Pleasant, then I think the reality of this building will break the heart of the community. And I just want to close. I happened to hear Mark Acton on the radio this morning briefly about the hearing resuming tonight, and the commentator asked him how he thought it would go, and he said, I think it will go through because it's the right thing. And I thought, how confident to take a moral stand like that on something so huge in this neighborhood. And
so you're over your time.
Okay,
just wrap up quickly.
I hope you are seeing the people that you are meant to serve, and I hope you're hearing us, and I hope you will do.
Thank you very much. Councillor Meggs, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do have a question.
I have a question for you from Councillor Meggs.
I mean, you just used the term heartbreaking. So what's the core betrayal that you see in this? Is it that is there one thing you would point to that makes this, say development, bring it on, be respectful, but this one's a heartbreaker. So what's the heartbreaking part of it?
I think because the process that we went through, and I put sticky notes places, and I said, yeah, some additional height here, additional height, we realize now was way too vague a term to use anywhere. But
is that the crux of it, the height?
The height, the bulk, if you look at that little triangle between Main and Kingsway, north of Broadway, if that's the heart, then this thing that wants to be beside it is more than height. It's the mass. It's the monolithic,
Your building, which I agree is very beautiful, is edge to edge on its property. So, there may be a little garden there, but it can't be very large. Do you have any idea what the density is of Quebec Manor?
Ratio thing? No, I don't know that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know. I'm sure I take your point that the height is there. So the plan said there would be higher buildings there, but in your mind that was nothing close to what's proposed by this project. No. Okay, so it's fundamentally the height.
It's the height and sort of the mass. because I walk by there. I like walking by the new developments farther, where you can have a conversation with what's going on and the businesses. And what I'm afraid of is kitty corner on the northeast side of Kingsway and Broadway. There is a relatively new development. I think it's maybe 8 or 9 stories with retail on the bottom, which is endlessly empty. And something's there, and then it's gone, and then something else is there, and it's gone. And even farther up Kingsway towards Mount St. Joe's, there's a development where this retail space is sitting empty, and I don't know what that problem is, but I'm afraid that there may be just more of it.
Well, the Honda dealership's pretty stable, which was interesting.
Kingsway will never escape its automobile.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for coming, Ms. Purcell. And next up is Tracy Michaud. Is Tracy Michaud here? Okay. She's followed by number 137, Tavis McCallum, then Attila Fodor, Lindsay Brown, Melissa Woods. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I would like to take a moment to thank you all for being here to support the changes that are happening within the community. This turnout represents a passion for Mount Pleasant, and the participation from everyone is incredible. My name is Tracy Michaud, and I would like to speak of the different dynamics the Rise Kingsway project may bring to Mount Pleasant. As an artist who has lived, worked, and still continues to shop on a weekly basis here, I believe this project is a step in the right direction concerning revitalization of said area, not only for commerce purposes, but also for the protection of current home and apartment dwellers within the community. It's a long-term project that will bring more jobs to the community, short and long-term along the way. As a company aiming for LEED Silver standards with this project, this will keep money in the Lower Mainland area concerning suppliers and tradesmen. This greener thinking is a continued action from RISE, as available information shows from their previous and ongoing projects, like On Q or also the Rollston on Granville. It is an important part of the process to look at past and present projects RISE has completed, as it may give us a better awareness of their building standards and ethics as a company. I think that they have been as transparent as possible regarding the development of their ideas on what a suitable building can be in Mount Pleasant. I appreciate the different styles that they're trying to utilize that bring them further from the plain old steel and glass buildings that seem to be opposed as of late by many Vancouverites. The masonry work is unique, as is the colored glass and graffiti sections, and speaking as an artist, I feel that this building is visually interesting and that they are designing an art piece that will appeal to many. But, as all art is in the eye of the beholder, not everyone will feel this way. Further, the collaboration with local artist Emmanuel Bienvier's work was used as a starting point for Acton Austri's expression of color, and it makes me excited at the possibilities of art-inspired architecture. Understandably, though, it can't appeal to everyone, as that is the nature of art. Will Lynn has made a point to include his artistic aspirations in the many RISE statements, and I quote, "Our inspiration derives from projects that inspire." RISE seems to like to express an artistry in a lot of their buildings and should be allowed to do that here. Design by committee is not what we want in Vancouver. There have been a lot of mudslinging in this journey, and a lot of people have expressed complete opposition to RISE's artistic vision and proposed development, and I feel it's important to remind everyone that if we are to have a free and clear artistic vision in our personal and professional lives, should these rights and freedom of expression not be extended to Mr. Lynn and his company? I assure you that if I were in a similar situation and were creating some art of permanence for the community, I would listen to what the community's opinion of what I am creating should be. However, that being said, I am a creative professional, and in the end, it would be my hand creating the stroke on my canvas. I can't convince you all to like what my artistic interpretation may be, but I would hope for respect and artistic freedom. Those are my rights as a person and as a professional, as they are for Mr. Lynn. What a great thing to be heard and to have an impact on permanent fixtures within the community. But we must be realistic. RISE is not going to go back to the beginning, nor should it be expected. They have already changed many design features of the structure to try and include the imaginative concepts of residents here. Ultimately, though, Mr. Lynn and his team of highly trained professionals are the ones holding the paintbrush before the canvas, so to speak. Let us remember the rights and freedoms that apply to us apply to everyone, even if we may not always agree with it. We must look at the entire picture before us. People want less height, but the growth of the area suggests more density is required to continue the productive growth of Mount Pleasant. Rise has taken a middle-of-the-road approach and altered their design to reduce the height, but it's not enough to placate all of the residents, and at this point, I don't think they will be happy with anything Rise has to offer. There is a group here trying to make a point, and I'm not sure they'll be happy unless they have it all. But we coexist as best we can and strive to make life better and more productive for all. That being said, I would like to mention some of the positive things that this developer has already brought to the area. I'm loving the pop-up retail that's been going on for quite some time. It's really fun to stop in and see all of the different collaborations that are going on, and it's nice to see a larger company using their holdings in such a productive and sharing manner. This is only one of the ways Rise is already contributing to the economic growth and diversification of Mount Pleasant. This is giving entrepreneurs the opportunity to display and sell anything from art and clothing, and empowers them to test the market, so to speak, with little financial cost to themselves personally. It will also be interesting to see how the $538,000 public art contribution is used. I am also liking how Rise has provided a large cash community amenity contribution to the city for cultural use in lieu of the 9,200 square foot community art space. Perhaps we can move the focus to a new direction by deciding how and where this money will be spent. Maybe a community swimming pool could be in the works. Whatever the community and the city decides to do with the money, it is regardless a great contribution to the living standard of Mount Pleasant residents and should be appreciated for what it is. A commitment to the positive changes that are happening here. I think this building will be a part of the intricate tapestry that continues to be woven in this magnificent city of Vancouver. In conclusion, I feel that many communities could benefit from the level of commitment Rise has given to Mount Pleasant. This meeting is so important for the betterment of the community, and that's why I'm talking about so much more than the height of a tower, as there is more to consider. I thank you for hearing me out, and again for being here to be a part of the productive and positive changes within Mount Pleasant. Thank you.
Thank you for coming to speak. And next up is Tavis McCallum, followed by Attila Fodor.
Oh, God. There you go. Sorry, I have to correct you on my pronunciation. My name is Tavis. So
Tavis.
Now everyone knows I have to be consistent.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, it corrected me my whole life, so oh well. I've heard a lot of really great speakers, but I wanted to bring up one person that I heard previously. That was Annabelle Vaughn. I think from last meeting or so, and she did an amazing job of articulating many of the concerns that I have and of other folks in the neighborhood. And I wanted to bring her up because it's a better speech than I will probably give, and I wanted to encourage council to go back and have a listen to it again. Like her, I feel this site, I'm okay with the amount of density and increased density in the neighborhood. I've lived here ever since I came back to Vancouver after university. But I think the form is wrong, and there's much to disagree with in the details. The height, I don't think, is in line with community expectations, and it needs to be decreased some. And I think the retail space is too large, and it borders on a big box sort of space. And I think there's going to be a lot of complications with what I'm hearing, that there's going to be semi-trailer parking necessary, and I think that's going to complicate things with the bike lane on 10th and Watson Street. And I think the planning seems to recognize that there's a really great opportunity for, some sort of Broadway line station just west of there and square there. And I think it's going to be odd to have a public space and a public square next to this lane that's going to see a lot more traffic from, a lot more cars and that sort of thing. And that's going to be complex. And I think that's a bit weird there. But so I'm opposed. But the main issue for me, in addition to all these other things, is that I just really don't think that the building fits the tone of the neighborhood at all. And I think that I feel strongly that if, as we develop our neighborhoods outside of downtown, which is what we're doing now, we have to ensure that they have these identities of their own. And I think I would hate to see Vancouver become this homogenous city that all kind of looks the same. And I think ideally we should be able to recognize one neighborhood from the other by just looking at a photo. If someone takes a photo of the West End, you can identify that that's where that is. And I think this development kind of doesn't get to that space. I think, to me, it looks like a typical tower and podium building that we see a lot in downtown, but the veneer of red brick and stuff, it doesn't make it enough to make it a Mount Pleasant building. I think it just doesn't feel like it's been made for the neighborhood to me. It's been feel like it's from a part of the other city, and we're trying to like really make it work in Mount Pleasant, even though it's not going to. So I'm opposed because I think we can do a lot better, and I think, as I said before, I'm into more density is fine, but this style of building is just not the right one for me and for the neighborhood. I think it's a really important site, as other people have said, and it's going to set the tone for the future development, and so I think this would be a very poor one to start off with. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for coming to speak. And next up is Attila Fodor. Attila Fodor. That's 138. 139, Lindsay Brown. Yes? Okay. Thanks for letting us know that. We're almost there. 139 is Lindsay Brown. Is Lindsay Brown here? She's sick. Okay. Melissa Woods, 140, is here. And then we'll check on your number. Otherwise, I've got Raina Milne, Adam Fraser. Didn't we have Adam Fraser earlier? And Adam Fraser, Natalie Johal. Welcome.
Hey, good evening. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I've been following this for the last couple of years. I had notes, and I'm not going to use them because I can't read them, and I'm a bit nervous. So I've lived in Mount Pleasant for going on 11 years now. I live in one of the artwork buildings, or artist live work buildings down on 1st Avenue, so technically I'm not in Mount Pleasant because I'm on the wrong side of the street, but it's a funny little neighborhood. I'm not part of Chinatown. I'm definitely not part of Yaletown. The Olympic Village isn't really a village yet, so Mount Pleasant has kind of de facto become my home base, and I walk up and down that hill 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7 times a week. So when I came home from a trip a few years ago and found out that my friend's studio had burned to the ground on either Christmas Eve or Boxing Day, it sort of took me by surprise, and when I found out he was okay, that was great. And we all sort of sat around drinking coffee a few days later and kind of thought, okay, what's going to go up in place of this? And when all of the community planning stuff sort of started happening, we got really excited. We thought, you know what, as residents, as people who love, we love our neighborhood. I'm sure you guys have gotten that impression. I hope most people love where they live, especially in a city as great as ours. But I find that people who live in Mount Pleasant really, truly love it. I walk down the street. I don't walk down the street without running into a friend, a neighbor, somebody who works in a store. The guy who sells me bottles of Coke and cigarettes at the convenience store passed away earlier this spring, and there was like a huge mourning in the neighborhood. It was like John, the guy who runs the convenience store, passed away, and I've never lived anywhere where you're on first name basis with the guy who runs the bookstore, the guy who serves you coffee. Anyways, I'm rambling. Sorry. I can see my clock there, 1:47. Okay. I have no idea where I was going with that. Anyways, I love my neighborhood. Most of my friends love their neighborhood as well. So we got excited with the community plan, and we thought great things are going to come, and we, slowly new buildings started being built, and that was great because restaurants were a little bit more full. And we started getting a few more services and whatnot. And so when I found out it was 26 stories for the Rise building, it just sort of, like everyone or many others have said, it kind of went against all of the conversations I've had with all of the people sitting at tables. I remember the Post-it notes and the great conversations that we had about what we saw our little neighborhood as becoming. I think it was a bit of a slap in the face, and I think the initial reaction was the sheer height of the building, and then to find out later that it was 32 cut down to 26. And then we lose the rental housing, it goes down to 19. We don't get a public amenity. Money goes somewhere into the city, not into our neighborhood. Sorry. Okay. It stays in the neighborhood? Okay. Very good. Thank you for clarifying that. Anyway, just all of these little add-ons. But I think the initial reaction really truly was the height. Like I say, I live down on First Avenue between Scotia and Prince Edward, so I've got a 14-story hotel going up across the street from me that's tied into the Great Northern Way campus, and I've got the wall of condos sort of slowly creeping in from the Olympic Village, and that's cool because I live at the bottom of the hill, and it's tied into Chinatown, and it's tied in somewhat to Yaletown, and we're by the water, and I can kind of accept that, although I might come back and tell you I don't if there's a meeting about it later on. But somehow the top of the hill just doesn't seem like a great place for such a monolithic building. I work in Burnaby. I took Broadway home. I drove this evening, and I could see City Hall. From the time I went through the intersection at Renfrew, I kept getting glimpses of City Hall all the way down Broadway. And if I'm not mistaken, this building will be taller and sits at approximately the same elevation. And I just thought, I don't know if I want that big beacon as sort of the landmark for my building. I don't know that that's what I want, and I'm pretty sure that's not what most of my neighbors want. So there we go. You know, density is great. We need more, more people will move here, and that's wonderful. But I think that there's a lot of other ways to do it other than a big tower on top of a podium with maybe a relocated bylaw when Kingsgate Mall goes, with a grocery store on the corner, with trucks coming down a lane over a bike path. And when that transit station goes in, I mean, Broadway and Cambie is busy right now. Anyways, blah, blah, blah. Thank you. I'm at 4 minutes and 51 seconds, so I'll wrap it up. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming out to speak. And so Raina Milne, it sounds like, couldn't make it tonight. She's 141. I have Gail Gavin, I have you down at 148. So we may get to you if people stick to their times. We're getting close. 142 is Adam Fraser. Is Adam here? Is Natalie Johal here? 143. She's coming down, okay. 144, Malcolm Levy. 145, Robert Sutherland. 146, Robert Kralji. 147, Robert Studer. 148, Gail Gavin. And this must be Natalie Johal.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you. So I want to start by saying that I've been here every night so far. This is the first night that I've sat from the gallery, and it's been pretty enlightening. It's more than abundantly clear that we have a councillor here who is detached, disinterested, preoccupied with other stuff. We've got a council who, what I've seen from up there is that only 2 are taking meaningful or relevant notes. We have a councillor who plays on their phones. We've got a lot of stuff going on while people are here talking. So please, I beg you, respect the people, respect the process. I mean, it's just, it kills me. It kills me.
So I will say a lot of councillors do take notes on their Blackberries and computers and are looking at the
look straight down on what people are doing on their phones, and
so
it's not that. So I respect what you're saying, but that's not what's happening. My name is Natalie. Hello. I will start by quoting from environmental historian Richard White, who says, "Planning is an exercise of power, and in a modern state, much real power is suffused with boredom. The agents of planning are usually boring. The planning process is boring. The implementation of plans is always boring. In a democracy, boredom works for bureaucracies and corporations as smell works for a skunk. It keeps danger away. Power does not have to happen behind the scenes. It can be open." So I implore you to think about all of that. These people here are not a danger. They're part of the process, or at least they ought to be. I don't know that all of what White says is true. There are probably planners and exciting plans that don't receive ample opportunity or attention here. I do know for sure, though, that along the lines of boredom, this applicant's plan is boring. It's so boring. And it's rare and amazing, actually, that something so boring could incite so much anger, frustration, and action. But here we are. People are upset. and are here en masse contesting this application. People have come to you intelligently, articulately, academically. Citizens are frustrated, and they're not frustrated just because they're bleeding hearts, just because they're here spouting emotion. Their frustrations rooted in not just matters of opinion, but matters of fact. So, for example, we know for a fact that RISE violates C3A. It breaks your own rules. It's a fact that it violates the Mount Pleasant Plan. It's a fact that it benefits from the Now Dense STIR program without actually adhering to the requirements of that program. So, in essence, it's benefiting. It receives heightened density without providing any rental units. Let's see here. Oh, and it's important to note that it benefits from an expedited permit process, even though the STIR is dead. Now, if in the face of all of that, a project like this can go through, it becomes, or at least appears glaringly apparent, that we have a council who works counter to its communities rather than in cooperation to them, or with them. This isn't about one backyard or another. This is about the city working as an organic whole, where every backyard is everyone's backyard. If considered in those terms, what we're talking about here is inclusivity, not its opposite. This isn't about people resisting change. We're here demanding it. Change the project, change the process. We ask that you make developers pay their way. Treat building in the city as a privilege, not a right. What the developer has put on the table here is a half-baked plan, and it's an insult. It's offensive. It offends ethics. It offends aesthetics. It's ugly. We ask that you think big, and building big often means that you're thinking small. You don't have to build big to do big things. Buildings done correctly are meant to serve, enliven, append, and complement communities, not smother, suppress, and subordinate them. Each building, therefore, is an opportunity to make a city brick by brick better. Excuse the metaphor. So we need to look at doing developments differently. We need to be building the city of our dreams by building the buildings of our dreams. I don't think this is the building of anyone's dreams. I can't accept that. I don't buy that. I don't think that this is the best that our applicant can do. I don't think that this is the best use of their talent, the clearest articulation of their hopes, hearts, and minds. I can't accept that this is in keeping with any of your values. I don't want to believe that. And maybe that's naive, maybe that's utopic, maybe that's misguided. But I don't want to believe that these are your values,
You're over your time. If you could just wrap up, please.
Yes, I will. Thanks. So, Mr. Mayor, if you want a happy planet, we need to start with a happy city. You come to us with a vision. Be a visionary. Be more than your brand. Be more than your platform. Let vision be what you live. Let it be what you leave. If you miss this opportunity, it's a heartbreaker. But you're missing the opportunity. You're missing the point. And I think that's the saddest thing of all that could happen here. That you're missing the point of all of these people who have come to you brightly and hopefully just wanting something from you guys. Just listen. It's a hearing. Listen, hear us. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Next up is Malcolm Levy. Malcolm Levy's here. And then 145, Robert Sutherland is next. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council, for having these hearings.
You can raise that podium up if you want to use the magic button there on the left, or on the right side. Yeah.
Technology. It's just an amazing thing these days. Thank you so much, Mayor. Thank you so much, Council, for having us here today. I'm not going to speak about the facts with regard to the building itself, the plan for Mount Pleasant, or any of those things, because it's obvious and really palpable the hypocrisy that we're even having this discussion. What I'm going to speak about is the future of the community of Mount Pleasant, how it's going to affect the entire community itself, and the arts and cultural community as a whole. My history in this arts and cultural community goes back the last 15 years starting the New Forms Festival in this area of Vancouver, working on the Cultural Olympiad, working on Summer Live for the City of Vancouver, working on culture that engages and brings people together in the city. I'm a supporter of densification, but densification that's done responsibly. This is not being done in even the most remote sense responsibly. Maybe in terms of an overall idea of a plan, but there is no plan. What happens to the arts and cultural community? That still hasn't been even figured out even remotely. The reason I bring up arts and culture around this is because the Rise is using our area. It's using our identity and trying to usurp that from us. This exact same thing has happened in Queen Street West in Toronto and many other areas across our own city itself. We can't let this happen. I'll finish with one point. In the memory of Jim Green, let's try to do culture for our city itself. And please show the vision and the mandate of culture, which was one of the 3 precepts that you were voted in originally on, and actually support the City of Vancouver and its cultural community before it's completely destroyed. Thank you.
Mr. Levy, you have questions from Councillor Meigs.
Yeah, Mr. Levy, I don't see how this building is an attack on arts and culture.
This building is an attack on arts and culture for 3 reasons. 1, because it's using an identity of arts and culture, when in reality what it does is raise the entire cost of the community and further pushes people out. I mean, the building was burnt down. I don't know how much clearer that is an attack on the people who were artists in that building. Number 2, it's an attack.
You're not suggesting that someone burned it down to cause development, are you?
I am suggesting that, as a matter of fact, and I think a lot of people in the city have suggested that. Why? Are you suggesting that it wasn't for that reason, Councillor Meigs?
I have no evidence either way. I'm trying to clarify your thoughts.
Okay, because I'm trying to clarify that, and it seems that you're not confident one way or the other either. Does anyone else want to speak on this issue while we're here?
Well,
really?
Mr. Levy, I'm simply asking whether that was your thoughts, and if you have any evidence of arson, then you should say so. But I mean, if it was arson to create way for development, then I can see what your argument is now. I may not accept it.
Yes, I absolutely do believe that.
Okay. So
secondly, the cost of living in the area only rises by the day based on the developments. And like I said before, I'm absolutely a supporter of controlled densification that helps the community. There's not even going to be an art space in this building anymore. Before, when they were coming to meet with the community, there were these wild promises of that. This pop-up space that woman who claims to be an artist said before, it doesn't even exist. There's a Maynard's inside. They had one event, the Cheaper Show, which lasted for 1 week. And even they weren't satisfied with what happened there. It's complete hypocrisy. It's not happening. It's absolutely not happening. And for the people to claim that, it's ridiculous. And third, and of course the most important, architecture is part of art. And the design for this building and how it's completely, ridiculous with regard to any kind of architectural structure that makes us look like a city that has any kind of aesthetic. It's just disgusting. Is there any other questions from anyone else at this point? Councillor Meigs, anything else?
No, that was great. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Councillor Meigs.
Okay, next up, Robert Sutherland, 145.
Thanks, Mayor and Council. Over the past 4 years, I've been involved with the Mount Pleasant Community Liaison group that helped draft the community plan, and I'm also with 2 local nonprofits. One with concern with public space and laneways, the other with the creation of affordable artist production studios. I think this is one neighborhood that is both willing and capable to take on more density and could conceivably become a model as to how it might be accomplished with community input. Coming on the heels of the community planning program, there's much better informed and assertive electorate. New development can be done without damaging the human scale and fine-grained qualities of Mount Pleasant, but this requires an acknowledgement of context and not a one-size-fits-all approach. The C3A zoning requires precisely this for any conditional approval and stipulates the necessity of preserving the character and general amenity of the area and its immediate surroundings. And I think what you're hearing is that loud and clear is this community from this community is that we do not support the rezoning of this site for this project as proposed. There's an important idea here that public equity, a sum of public goods or an account of them, which exists and that shouldn't be available for conversion into private profit for a limited few and to the detriment of everyone else. We need to be adding to this account instead, and Mount Pleasant is relatively rich in this equity, a cultural, physical, and social commons, if you like. The community plan begins to outline many of these qualities, and when you look at the broader array of values espoused by the plan, to my reading, there can only be one conclusion, and that is that this is not the right project for the site. I'm in agreement with those who have stated that it's not about laying blame, but recognizing that the system is not working, and the result is this kind of podium tower development we are debating. Even the Architectural Institute of British Columbia initiated an architectural design competition in 2007 to try and convince others of the need to move away from POTOs, as they called them, and had this to say in their mission statement for the competition. The prototype has become an automatic architectural response to the needs of Vancouver's urban core and is being exported to other urban centers around North America. While it has been successful at increasing density and meeting city planning goals and developers' business plans, it has drawn little from the city's architectural talent and achieved little in terms of architectural innovation. It has been replicated to an extent that it threatens the diversity of Vancouver's neighborhoods and promises a monotype and monoculture as a replacement for social and architectural diversity and a truly urban place. So I just think it's important to stay with this idea of place for a moment. Physically, the triangle block adjacent to the Rise site breaks the planner's blueprint grid system. Some features are the peculiar street Kingsway, originally an ancient animal trail running diagonally, and the resulting triangle block. The meandering Brewery Creek, gone from view but not forgotten. District anomaly, Watson Street, and finally the notion of the hill town itself. And all these add to a kind of an organic sense of the neighborhood. The Rise site, as you note, sits at a nexus of all these elements and reflects none. Mount Pleasant seems to suffer not from a lack of expectations, but the greatest of urban aspirations, the order and stability and companionability of a town or village with the complex cultural vitality of the cosmopolitan city. I think many would argue that a civically literate community is where this process can lead, needs to lead to and from. And we have that available now on the heels of the Mount Pleasant Community Plan, which is wrapped up recently. This is not a bedroom community surrounded by a shopping mall. It's a place with a long history that values traditions of family, workshop, creativity, and welcoming newcomers and visitors alike. We have a unique manufacturing district here, for instance, which the Jansen building is an early representative of. Just finally, this year in Mount Pleasant, we're preparing to celebrate the centenaries of many buildings the people here really are passionate about, including the Lee and Quebec Manor, and celebrating social and cultural heritage as well. I've heard from some that the sacrifice of the northern section of Watson at Broadway is acceptable, but no one has mentioned that Watson effectively ends one block further to the north at Kingsway, and that damage here has far greater implications that is led on. If you stand at Watson and Broadway and look back across Broadway, right between the two deco buildings on Broadway, on the north side of Broadway into the heart, you will see that Watson actually doglegs and comes out onto Kingston. And this connection also mirrors the path of the Brewery Creek, which the Rise is on top of. This link, I think, aspires to be completed, and which somehow we are suggesting is better suited to service an underground 320 car park and big box store. So just in conclusion, I'll just say that I think getting it right in this neighborhood is what we want to leave as a legacy, and thanks for your time.
Thank you. Councillor Reimer has a question for you.
Just a question. I'm trying to find the design competition online, and do you mind sending us a link to it? Is that easy for you to do? The power. You know where I'm going with that? The photo one from 2007?
Sure, I can send you.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for coming to speak. Robert Kralji is next on the speakers list, number 146. Robert Kralji here? Yes. Then Robert Studer, and I think our last speaker will be Gail Gavin. Welcome.
Good evening. Hi. I don't live in Mount Pleasant. I live in Vancouver, however, and I have my whole life, born at St. Paul's Hospital. I like what one of the previous speakers said. She said everyone's backyard is everyone's backyard, and I think that's accurate. People in Vancouver, we appreciate the neighborhoods, but I do consider the city as a whole as one large neighborhood and appreciate the diversity all over it. So when I heard the ruckus over the last several months about this development, I figured I should take some time and come and see what was happening here. And so I took a couple of hours. I know Mount Pleasant quite well from hanging out here through the years. And I know, of course, Kingsway, which I used to commute a lot. And I was quite, having heard the ruckus, but not too many of the details. So I came with a fresh set of eyes to the site. And I walked the site, and I have to say that I was quite pleasantly surprised with the proposal, and particularly the location on Kingsway where it was. It felt to me much more like a Kingsway, the Kingsway neighborhood development, as opposed to, I suppose that's nominally Mount Pleasant, but I never really thought of that as Mount Pleasant as a Vancouver resident. So this sort of dead zone along Kingsway there, I think this would be excellent for that. So that's one of the reasons I think it's a good project. Of course, not everyone likes a tower, and not everyone likes a certain design, and I don't mind a little bit of height, and I don't mind modernity, a modern look. So, but I can understand others don't care for that. But that's just a matter of personal taste, and you can't please everybody for that. But in terms of density, it seems one thing that everyone says is they're pro-density. Everybody's pro-density, and usually it's just followed by a but, and then there's some other stuff that comes after that. When I listen to it, and I try to sincerely listen to it, and it doesn't really sound like they're pro-density, because when we say we're pro-density, we generally follow that up by saying of course, we want density that's serviced by good transit. So we have this sort of package that there seems to be a consensus on, which is density with transit, not too impactful on neighborhoods, as they are, some change, but not too much change, and hopefully we can have some kind of consensus and move forward with the much-needed density and the transit. This spot is, you could almost not pick a more perfect location as far as I'm concerned, existing in the city than this one for this kind of density, given the fact that this transit that will come there is much needed, and I think it's a perfect fit. As long as I understand the community plan says 3 towers, obviously there has to be some sort of limit on tower growth there to minimize impact on the neighborhood. But one of the things about the walk around the site, I realized that, I was expecting to see stuff immediately in the vicinity impacted. Impact, of course, spreads like a penny in a pond, but it's positioned very nicely as far as I'm concerned. And I'll just end by saying this spot on Kingsway there, and as far as I'm concerned, up much of Kingsway heading east, needs this kind of revitalization. And I think this is a part of the city. Kingsway's been an embarrassment as far as I'm concerned for a long time in the city, and it's an important thoroughfare, but it's been something that seems to have had no planning to it. And I think this is something that really could help, particularly in this area. Thanks for your time.
All right, thank you for coming to speak. And Robert Studer is next. 147, Robert Studer. Not here, so looks like our last speaker will be Gail Gavin, number 148. And then if councillors have some questions to leave with staff before we begin our next hearing next Wednesday, staff can come back with those answers. Thank you for coming, and being here till the end. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors and proponents and all the residents. Thank you for being here late all these nights. And I think that it's a pretty exciting process that's going on here. It's what I think of as community development. And I have a PowerPoint that once... I'm sorry. Thank you. How do I advance?
You're going to use this, and you just use the dial to move it.
This goes forward, that goes back.
Yep. Okay. Or you can just use the wheel if you'd like that too.
Okay. You ready to roll?
So I think that we're going through a very exciting process here of community development and a lot of interest from the community. And this is encouraged and reflected by the community plan itself. I think now is a moment for us to, as somebody said, brick by brick, change our city to being more sustainable and to creating more sustainable living. That would be great. Thank you. Okay. I spent quite a bit of time looking through the community plan, and section 3.11 says public engagement, that we want to build community capacity throughout the planning and development process, ensuring that the process seeks common ground and reflects the interests of the broad community. Next. It goes on to say that we want to create a governance structure and a process mechanism that will ensure that design solutions and implementation strategies will meet the needs of the community while upholding the principles of the Mount Pleasant Community Plan. I want to pause to say that I don't support this development. I don't live in the area. I was born at St. Paul's Hospital, raised at 38th and Nanaimo, attended John Norquay School and Gladstone School. I've lived in all sorts of neighborhoods in the East End, and I don't think that we can import towers and podiums from Falls Creek or north side of Falls Creek and the areas where they've been implemented into our neighborhoods and communities. Please remember, nobody lived there when those designs went up. I don't live in Mount Pleasant. I'm familiar with the area. I've spent a lot of time on Main Street. And I see this as being a time for us to stop and pause about how we are going to develop our neighborhoods. Yes, we need more density. Yes, we're getting more density. Some great things I've seen happen between Broadway and Fraser Street. I want to, at this time, have you look at the community plan and see one way to view, that one might view the intent of the plan. Under 3.4, large sites development, it says, the community supports greater use of infill opportunities over high-rise, but sees opportunities for some high-rise as well as mid-rise. That's a bit ambivalent. Now, in light of the proposal that's before us, does some high-rise as well as mid-rise mean maybe some high-rise, maybe none, maybe only mid-rise, maybe some high-rise on one side and mid-rise on another? Does it mean both on each? Next, please. It could be reasonably expected from those words that this site would receive a different treatment. It says at 3.41 under large site development that for the purpose of achieving more open space, less paving, better connection to the street, and important public benefits, we could pursue additional height and density in selected locations. And that is one of these. This location, one of 3 locations. Next, please. Then it says very specifically, 3.4, that for these sites, any additional height and density would be contingent upon further urban design analysis, including the ability of people to see and walk through the site. That's not going to happen here. Next, please. These are some pictures. They come under housing. Would you go to the next slide, please? It says, additional housing, allow increased housing density in Mount Pleasant, transit hubs, commercial centers along arterial streets. If you go back to that picture, please. I get the sense from looking at that picture at the bottom, which is 12 stories, would be increased housing density. Could you go forward 2 more slides, please? It says that the large site development, that there would be more height along Broadway and reduced height along 10th Avenue. So if one gets the impression, as one could from that picture, that these images represent more height, like the last one, why would one expect a tower on 10th Avenue? Next, please. These are all the words that are in the community plan about the Rise Tower, and none of them say anything very specifically, or none of them support the mass and the height. This is it. Now, I understand, could you just go back one, please? I understand that there are pictures that were put in by planning, I'm told, by people more involved than I, and I know that pictures can be deemed as a part of the community plan, but boy, that's a pretty technical point. I'm a lawyer, and I looked it up and I searched it out. I don't think most people would particularly pick up on that. Next, please. Mr. Lin and Mr. Chan have a stake in this proposal that must be respected. And this is an analysis of all the purchases, etc., the mortgages that have been placed. Next one, please. Mr. Lin, honoring their honest intent to serve the community, if we're going to be inclusive, we want them to be okay. And their situation is, as I see it, that their property is now assessed at $17 million, that they paid, or people paid, $10 million for it, and there's a $14 million mortgage running at 8%. Wow. They might have got some money from the insurance because the blog says that it was insured. That might have been $2.3 million, so they might have a gain, a gross gain of $9 million, but they had to pay something when they bought out Narland in 2006. The property had gone out, and of course there's the expenses of this hearing. Next.
So Ms. Gavin, I've given you some extra time given the technical glitches, but need you to wrap up.
Thank you. So for a little levity in your entertainment, I'll play the economist. I figured out the square foot ratio that they're asking for increase if we went under the current zoning. And you can laugh, I said $100 profit a square foot. That would be about $12 million. If we went with their present proposal at 100, it would be about $26 million. Next, please. So one of the things that's really encouraging to me, because the community plan says the overarching goal of this review is to improve representativeness, diversity, trust, and creativity in neighborhood decision making. Next.
So this is going to be your last slide. This is your couple minutes over time now.
That's okay. So this, I suggest that this application and these public hearings are just the beginning for that goal, that overarching goal. The script from your script from the plan, or our script from the plan, says that there will be a first step, this and that. But I think that we have to read, life happens while we're busy making other plans. And so, ladies and gentlemen who are here tonight, this is what's happening. We are now in the community development process, and this is iconic in that process. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And you can email that to mayor and council at vancouver.ca if we missed the slide there due to timing.
Thank
So
you very
thank you
much.
for coming to speak. We need a motion to extend to be able to get the questions in here. Councillor Meggs, to extend to hear questions from councillors. All those in favour? Any opposed? And that carries. So a quick round of questions. Councillor Carr?
Yes, these are for staff.
Yes,
Mr. Mayor, thank you.
can bring back answers.
Thank you. Number one, I'd like a clarification on some of the information provided to us that the Urban Design Panel was given the wrong information around the heights under current zoning, and that this site was not identified in the MCP plan for higher upzoning. There was several speakers that raised that there were 3 locations and this really wasn't the same as the other 2. If you could just, yeah, thank you. Number 2, I'd like information. I asked for this last time and I still feel unclear about it. There seems to be a premise that increased density in a single building can increase affordability. And that gets mixed up with saying just more housing gives us more affordability. I'm wondering if you could look at maybe the last upzonings, spot rezonings, which increased density, maybe in the STIR program. We just had a report on it this morning. And see if their increased density led to increased affordability. Maybe compare it to average selling prices in that area. For us, there was maybe 6 or so projects, something like that. But I'm really wanting to know if people are saying density is more affordable. I want to know if there's any data that backs that up. And third, there was the first speaker, or close to the first speaker, talked about conflict of interest, and I'm wondering if you can ask legal staff to report back to us on whether or not parties or elected individuals who receive donations from Rise Alliance are in conflict of interest on this, voting on this.
Okay, Councillor Reimer?
Thanks. 3 hopefully fairly quick questions, which I've typed them out and will email them to you as well. Jerry's Mr. Dobroni's presentation earlier, I had it in my head that he was saying that the south side of the 10th Avenue bike route would be 2-way, and the north side of 10th Avenue would be like a 1-way traffic, like vehicle traffic, and then the bikeway would be in the south lane going 2-way, which sounds like I got it right. So then there's 3 commercial or apartment driveways on the south side of the street, and I wanted to get a sense of how would they get out, because from at least Google Street View they have no other way in or out of their respective buildings. And the second question was around the square footage of the large retailers in Kingsgate, or of the Bilo specifically. I don't know if there's a way to know that. I'm trying to understand why Bilo is not a big box and that light green piece is. Yeah, if that's possible to know. I tried to Google it, but they don't put that on their website. And the last one was if you could put the presentation from earlier tonight up online. Thank you.
Okay, that's all I have for councillors on the queue with questions. So we will call it a night there. We have the next sitting for this public hearing will be recessed until next Wednesday, April the 4th at 6 p.m. here in Council Chamber, 3rd floor City Hall. I'll just remind Council it's very important that you do not engage in any discussion or correspondence with regard to this application. And members of the public, speakers who still have more information to convey, mayor and council at vancouver.ca is the email to use. And we will recess. I'll recess this meeting until Wednesday, April the 4th at 6 p.m. Thanks everyone for coming out.